I'm the highest civilization in the universe. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 501, Current Fantasy. It's him. The man in black pointed at Li Ming angrily and roared. A dozen people looked at Li Ming and swarmed over him. Li Ming remained calm and narrowed his eyes. A light buzzing sound was heard, and the powerful mental power spread out. Those who were originally rushing towards Li Ming suddenly stopped in place, and then turned their heads and looked at the man in black. The eyes of these people were slightly cold. Seeing so many eyes, the man in black was stunned. After a moment of stunned, he said, "Why are you looking at me? Beat him up." As soon as the voice fell, these people suddenly swarmed over, surrounded the man in black, and beat him up. Looking at this, Li Ming smiled lightly, took Meng Lianai to the backseat of his car, opened the door, and said, "Please." Meng Lianai looked at the man in black who was being beaten, hesitated for a while, and got in the car. At this time, Li Ming did not sit in the front driver's seat, but sat in the back of the car with Meng Lianai. Meng Lianai was stunned for a moment, and looked at Li Ming. At this moment, Li Ming snapped his fingers with his right hand, and the car started, and drove away quickly in a blink of an eye. This strange phenomenon made Meng Lianai sweat coldly. Looking at the driver's seat in front, although there was no one, the steering wheel was turning, and the car was moving freely. Li Ming sat quietly aside with a calm expression. The powerful mental power enveloped the entire city, and everything in the city was like running in Li Ming's mind, all under Li Ming's control. Under his control, as long as Li Ming needed it, all order would be easily dominated. The vehicle shuffled quickly in the street. Li Ming already had a golden position. After looking at Meng Lianai beside him, he smiled lightly, but Meng Lianai looked nervous, with his hands clasped together, sitting far away on the other side opposite Li Ming, not daring to move at all. After the vehicle drove for a while, it stopped at the gate of a school. The light transmitting window looked at the people walking in the school, and leaned back to the back seat with a closed eye look. Meng Lianai secretly glanced at Li Ming, and after making sure that Li Ming's eyes were closed, she tried to open the car door with her hand, but after trying, she found that the car door could not be opened. Looking at Li Ming again, he was still motionless. Meng Lianai slowly took out her mobile phone, and the mobile phone still had zero signal at this time. Although Li Ming had his eyes closed, everything around him was under Li Ming's control. Meng Lianai looked at the people coming and going outside the car, and wanted to shout for help, but was worried that Li Ming would wake up, so she had no choice but to stay where she was and not move. After a while, a bell rang, and it was the school that was over, but Li Ming still closed his eyes and said nothing. Under the induction of mental power, a teacher immediately appeared under Li Ming's conscious observation. "This is Li Ming's wife," he muttered in his heart and kept observing. The body sitting in the car moved slightly, and his eyes slowly opened, but when Li Ming was about to do something, his brows suddenly frowned. He turned his head to look inside the school. The car window slowly opened, and through the fence, Li Ming saw the teacher, who was slightly fat and had long hair, standing in the open space in front of the teaching building. But the next moment, a male teacher with glasses suddenly trotted to his side. The two talked and laughed, and finally the woman grabbed the man with glasses by the arm and left intimately. Looking at all this with both eyes, the car window slowly closed, and all of this was seen by Meng Lianai. Li Ming's expression was a bit solemn, and his face was full of displeasure. Meng Lianai just watched without saying a word. After a while, at the school gate, the female teacher and the man got into the car together. Li Ming still watched quietly. As the other car started and drove away, Li Ming's car followed closely. All of this was seen by Meng Lianai, who was standing by. After a while of chasing, the car in front stopped at the door of a restaurant, and then the two got off the car and walked towards the restaurant. The woman took the man's arm and walked inside intimately. Li Ming still watched quietly, and his face suddenly became ugly. When Li Ming in the parallel universe is awakened, the memory will enter Li Ming's brain. If Li Ming amplifies the memory, he can completely empathize with the other person's feelings. Looking at the scene in front of him, memory and reality intertwine, and Li Ming can clearly sense the touch. Meng Lianai on the side also stared at Li Ming blankly, as if she had already felt the strangeness in Li Ming's heart. After a few seconds, a cuckoo sound suddenly sounded. The sound was not loud, but Li Ming heard it clearly. His consciousness immediately recovered, and he turned his head and looked at Meng Lianai beside him. Meng Lianai was startled and said quickly, I'm hungry. The shy face, coupled with the tiny voice and the aggrieved look, made people want to pity. After a slight smile, Li Ming said, let's go and eat. As he said that, Li Ming opened the door and got out of the car first. Meng Lianai was startled, seeing Li Ming open the door and stand outside looking at her. After hesitating for a while, Meng Lianai slowly got out of the car. Li Ming hugged the other person with one hand, put his palm on the other person's shoulder, and walked into the restaurant. This restaurant is divided into 2 floors. The first floor is the lobby, and the second floor is a separate private room. Li Ming took Meng Lianai and went straight to the second floor. As soon as she entered the lobby, Meng Lianai looked around and soon found the woman in a corner of the lobby. But when she looked up at Li Ming's expression was calm at this time. He did not look around, but went straight to the second floor. The man and woman in the corner did not seem to notice Li Ming's appearance and continued to eat by themselves. After arriving on the second floor, Li Ming and Meng Lianai chose a private room and sat down to order. This restaurant is not high-end, but it is also medium. The waiter smiled and said, what would you like to eat? Li Ming smiled lightly, looked at Meng Lianai, and said, order anything. Meng Lianai was still a little restrained. She looked at the menu, then looked at Li Ming. After a moment of hesitation, she looked like she didn't know what to do. Seeing this, Li Ming smiled and said, didn't you say you were hungry just now? Meng Lianai took the menu after hearing this. With a sad face, she began to think about other things in her mind, and her thoughts did not seem to be on the menu in front of her. Looking at the other person's expression, Li Ming frowned slightly. On this planet, Li Ming did not need a wise eye, he only needed his own mental power to see everything he wanted to know. But after knowing that the girl opposite was Meng Lianai, Li Ming still wanted to get the other party's recognition without using his spiritual civilization ability. Compared with the former Li Ming, the current Li Ming can be said to have any ability he wants. Just like his own fantasy, if I have superpowers, he will definitely recognize me. And now, what Li Ming has to do is to realize that fantasy. Meng Lianai hesitated and couldn't say anything and occasionally looked at the waiter. Li Ming couldn't help thinking when he saw this. Without using spiritual civilization ability, Li Ming still knew nothing about the other party's mind. With a light wave of his left hand, he turned his eyes to the waiter and said, the best dishes in your store, just serve. The waiter was stunned when he heard this. Li Ming glanced at the other party and said unhappily, what? Don't you understand? Oh, okay. The waiter was still stunned for a moment and turned away. Li Ming then turned his gaze back to Meng Lianai, but before Li Ming could say anything, Meng Lianai spoke first. I know you are not a bad person, but can you let me go? Li Ming was stunned when he heard this. Looking at the other party's pleading eyes, his eyebrows jumped and said, where are you going? I'll take you. It's not a question of whether to take you or not. I want to leave. Please forgive me. Let me go. Okay. Meng Lianai still had a pleading expression. Li Ming also leaned back lightly, thought for a while, and couldn't help but smile lightly, saying, okay, after this meal, you can leave. Hearing that Li Ming agreed to let her go, Meng Lianai was overjoyed and asked in surprise, really? Yeah. Li Ming nodded lightly, with a smile on his face. At this time, Li Ming began to recall what had happened before, and seemed to understand a little. As a member of an advanced civilization, Li Ming's style of doing things is very different from that of lower civilizations. This is unavoidable. Even if he has retained the emotions left by the heritage of the mother planet, it is difficult to get him back in the current way. Chapter 502 Understanding. For the whole afternoon, Li Ming sat alone in the box, quietly, without saying a word, and was always hesitating and wondering. Before leaving this world, can't I fulfill my little wish? He whispered in his mouth. Suddenly, a person stood at the door of the room. It was the waiter just now. Li Ming looked sideways, stood up and walked out. Leaving the restaurant, Li Ming drove away. Although Meng Lianai had left, her figure was still in Li Ming's sense at any time. Next, Li Ming had to complete the last thing, revenge. The car shuttled back and forth and came to the bottom of a tall building. Before the car stopped, a security guard at the gate ran over quickly. At this time, Li Ming had already got out of the car. "Sir, we don't allow parking here." As soon as the other party finished this sentence, Li Ming waved his hand casually, as if he was picking up something, and his eyes didn't even look at the other party. Just like this, the security guard flew out with a whoosh. Bang! With a dull sound, the security guard hit a car in the distance heavily, and could no longer move. At this time, the remaining security guard Li Ming on the first floor noticed this, and took out their weapons and rushed up. However, before these people could make a move, Li Ming's body suddenly disappeared from the spot with a buzz. When Li Ming appeared again, he was already standing in the middle of these people. A shockwave spread out with Li Ming's body. These people flew out with a whoosh and fell directly on the wall without any movement. Li Ming did not pause at all and continued to move forward quickly until he stopped at the elevator entrance. At this time, the elevator display was still on the upper floors and continued to go to the upper floors. Li Ming narrowed his eyes slightly. The elevator, which was originally on more than 20 floors, suddenly stopped. Several people in the elevator were also puzzled and reached out to press the elevator button again, but the next moment, they heard a buzz and the elevator fell back to the first floor directly, and even the elevator floor display did not have time to show it. The elevator door opened, and the people inside were safe and sound, and they fell to the ground and squatted in the corner. Li Ming entered the elevator, and the elevator door closed quickly, like a manual door, and then there was another buzz. The elevator door on the top floor opened, and the people who were inside crawled and rolled out, and some vomited on the spot. The two men in black uniforms guarding the elevator entrance were stunned when they saw this. They immediately looked into the elevator and saw Li Ming's figure walking out. "What are you doing?" As soon as the voice came out, the two men flew out and hit the wall in the distance with a bang and became unconscious. Li Ming continued to walk into the room. At this time, more than a dozen people stood up in a hall. These more than a dozen people were all dressed in black, and among them were the two who killed Li Ming. Seeing Li Ming appear here again, they were stunned. Li Ming raised his right hand lightly and pushed the two people lightly. Suddenly, a strong thrust came out from the palm of his hand, and the two people were like bullets shot out, directly hitting the wall behind them. Bang! The wall collapsed, and behind the wall was another room. In the middle of the room was a huge conference table. At this time, more than a dozen people were having a meeting around the table. But with the crash and the collapsed wall, everyone was stunned, and some people even pulled out their guns. But before these people could react, the water cups on the table in front of each person suddenly made a whoosh sound, and the water gushed out of the cups and turned into ice blades that directly pierced the hearts of the people in front of the table. In just a moment, everyone had already fallen on the table and stopped moving. After Li Ming took a glance, he confirmed the scene and turned away. After walking out of the main door on the first floor, Li Ming straightened his collar, came to his car, opened the door, and sat in the back. But at this moment, a picture suddenly flashed in Li Ming's mind, just like a dozen photos suddenly flashed quickly. It was just the photos that flashed, but the picture was already very clear. On the first floor of a villa, a man in black looked at Meng Lianai in front of him angrily. At this time, the man in black had a bandage wrapped around his right hand and his face was bruised. Seeing Meng Lianai standing in front of him, he shouted, "Why are you looking for me? If I can't afford to offend you, can't I hide from you? Hurry up and leave me. I'm almost dead." Meng Lianai also looked helpless and aggrieved, and said, "I didn't know it would be like this. Don't say anything, hurry up and leave." The man in black waved his hand and said impatiently. Meng Lianai didn't leave immediately, but just looked at him quietly. After hesitating for a while, he said, that thing." The man in black raised his hand to stop him from continuing to talk and said, "I can't help you anymore. Go find him, don't come to me." Meng Lianai looked aggrieved, with red eyes, as if she was about to cry. After pausing for a few seconds, she turned around and left quickly. At this time, Li Ming was on his way, but halfway through, Li Ming suddenly braked and stopped on the side of the road. He slowly closed his eyes and sighed. After hesitating for a while, Li Ming started the car and drove away. At this moment, a blue-white figure was approaching the city little by little. This person was flying in the sky, coming here like a big bird. Looking at the city not far away, this person smiled and whispered, "Finally I see a place with life." This person was Hull Menki, who was teleported here with Li Ming. At the beginning of the fall, the distance between the two was only 100 meters, but after arriving at this planet, the distance was gradually widened. Li Ming fell to the land, and Hull Menki fell into the ocean. The distance was gradually widened as he fell, but fortunately, this city was not far from the sea. Hull Menki finally saw a place where life appeared after a while of flying. At this time, Li Ming drove the car behind Meng Lian Ie, and finally came to a hospital in the city center. He stopped the car, and watched Meng Lian Ie enter the hospital. With his eyes narrowed slightly, Li Ming still used his mental power, which meant that Li Ming's fantasy would also be shattered at this moment. Following the other party into the hospital, Li Ming stopped at the door of a separate ward. Meng Lian Ie and her mother were sitting in front of the bed, and the person lying on the bed was her father. At this time, Li Ming had seen through the whole story. Meng Lian Ie's father was seriously ill and needed treatment expenses. The man in black obviously had the financial strength, but Li Ming did not get any help from the man in black. Even if Meng Lian Ie really became his girlfriend, it might not be really as she wished. From Li Ming's mental perception, the situation seemed not optimistic. But thinking back, even if Li Ming's fantasy came true, what could he give Meng Lian Ie? Because this would not be Li Ming's permanent residence. Standing outside the door and looking inside, Li Ming thought over and over again, and finally pushed the door, and entered the ward. Meng Lian Ie turned around, and saw Li Ming, and her body shrank in fear. Li Ming also quickly came to the bed and slowly raised his right hand. "What are you going to do? He is already like this. Didn't you say to let me go?" Meng Lian Ie shouted loudly. Li Ming glanced at the other person and said, "I'm also a doctor." After saying this, a green sphere condensed in the palm of Li Ming's right hand. It was Li Ming's biological civilization ability, Ghost Key. Then he turned his right hand, and the green shadow sphere turned over and entered the patient's body like a ghost. This disease may be fatal to humans, but for Li Ming, it is like a minor injury. The ghost key energy will enter his body, repair the damaged tissues in the flesh, remove those malignant cells, and restore the body to health. Meng Lian Ie then looked at his father lying on the bed. In just a few seconds, the sick man suddenly became energetic. Seeing this, Li Ming retracted his right hand and said, "You can be discharged now." As soon as the voice fell, Li Ming turned and left. Meng Lian Ie looked at Li Ming, who was leaving. He wanted to say something but didn't speak. However, when he saw his father who had recovered his spirit, he was still full of joy. After confirming that he had used his mental power, Li Ming was relieved at this moment. This was not his world, so why should he stay here? Chapter 503 High Voltage Purple Light. After settling the aftermath of this universe and his obsession with Meng Lian Ie, Li Ming stood on the top of a tall building, looked up at the sky, smiled slightly, and whispered, "It's time to leave." As he was talking, a figure came quickly from the sky, and the appearance of this person immediately attracted Li Ming's attention. Looking up, he frowned slightly and whispered, "Hull Monkey." At this time, the person in the sky was Hull Monkey. He immediately noticed Li Ming after a glance. After just a slight glance, Hull Monkey immediately stopped in place. The two looked at each other. Although they didn't say a word, their eyes were full of anger. "You are not dead," Hull Monkey said viciously. Li Ming also looked at each other cautiously. The two paused like this, which immediately attracted the attention of the crowd below. The monster that could float in the air naturally attracted everyone's attention. As the crowd grew larger and larger, Li Ming's slightly narrowed eyes had already sensed that something was wrong. Hull Monkey also kept examining Li Ming, whispering to himself, "Although there is not much energy left, it should be no problem to kill him." Li Ming clenched his fists tightly and prepared for the battle. But at this moment, Li Ming's face suddenly changed, and his eyes looked directly below the building. Among the crowd on the street, Meng Lian Ie was also among them. This made Li Ming's face change slightly. If he and Hull Monkey fought, it would inevitably threaten the crowd below, and more importantly, Meng Lian Ie was also among them. Li Ming was still thinking, and Holmenka's figure suddenly moved and rushed straight to Li Ming. I saw him wave his right hand, and a purple disc appeared on his palm, like a tray. There was no difference, but the powerful energy contained in it could be felt. Li Ming moved, and flew away quickly. Fighting here was not a wise move. Li Ming himself did not want to let the lives here pay the price, because of his own battle. It flew away from the top of the tall building, and headed far away, but at this moment, Holmenka suddenly waved his hand, and the disc flew out. The purple disc that was released from his hand quickly grew larger, like a large net that completely covered the sky. Li Ming, who saw this scene, frowned. The purple light was overwhelming and expanding, like a large fishing net. Li Ming's flying speed was not as fast as the diffusion speed of the purple light, and it was obviously too late to dodge. His figure stopped in place, and he looked up at the purple light. The whole sky suddenly darkened, but just when Li Ming was about to do something, his eyes suddenly sank, and looked at the ground. The people on the ground didn't know what was happening. They only saw that the sky was getting darker and darker, like dark clouds covering the sky and the sun. As a low-level civilization, how could humans have ever seen such a scene? As the sky darkened, it felt like, is the end of the world coming? Wait. Li Ming stopped running away, looked up at Holmenka in the distance and suddenly shouted. Hearing this, Holmenka showed a strange look, smiled and said, "What? Do you feel scared?" As he spoke, the purple light in the sky showed no sign of stopping and continued to expand. Looking at this situation, Li Ming's face was solemn, and he continued, "This is a matter between you and me. It's not worth it for the people here to die because of it." As soon as he said this, the purple light in the sky suddenly paused and stopped. Holmenka looked at Li Ming coldly, smiled lightly, and said, "Whether they can survive is the essence of a life force, not relying on pity. If they die, it just means that they should not exist." As soon as the voice fell, the purple net suddenly made a buzzing sound, flashing light, and expanding faster. Li Ming's eyes narrowed slightly, and the cloak behind him suddenly trembled, as if it was blown by the wind. In the fluttering, a pair of white feather wings had already formed, which were the Liuan wings. Aiming at the crowd at the bottom of the building just now, Li Ming flew down. Facing a second-level civilization, Li Ming could not stop the other party from killing, but Meng Lion i.e., Li Ming must save her. This is what Li Ming really thinks. Li Ming's actions also startled Holmenka. Li Ming, who was originally trying to avoid it, suddenly came to the center of the purple light, which puzzled Holmenka. Although I lost a lot of energy when crossing the blue hole, this guy can't be safe and sound, so he can only use the artifact. Looking down, Holmenka's right hand gently pressed down, and the entire purple light began to press down. At this time, the purple light has covered the entire city. When he was on the Isle of Star, Holmenka had seen the power of Li Ming's artifact, Niteng. If Li Ming used the artifact, Niteng, it would be really tricky for Holmenka in his current situation. The purple light began to press down, and the powerful energy gave people an inexplicable sense of oppression. Looking up at the purple light descending little by little, before the purple light touched the buildings, these buildings began to tremble slightly, and the glass shattered directly. As the purple light continued to go down, the concrete and bricks on the roof began to make a squeaking sound, and then cracks appeared from above. At this time, the purple light was still 100 meters away from the building, but the invisible pressure was already causing the building to begin to break. Just like the pressure of a vacuum. Bang, bang, bang. The explosion sound came from the top of the head. Unable to withstand the strong squeeze of energy, the bricks on the top of the building began to crack open, just like a bomb exploded bit by bit. Broken bricks and stone chips kept flying down from the top, and the humans in the street began to flee, and various shouts kept coming. But this was just the beginning. As the purple light continued to go down, the upper part of the high-rise building began to collapse, and the surrounding low-rise buildings also began to be affected. At this time, for these ordinary humans, there was almost no place to hide. The rubble on the street was shot down by stones from the surrounding buildings, and the people in the building could only run desperately. Under this pressure, the building had become unstable and might collapse at any time. Meng Lianai was one of the crowd. She looked up at the top of the building. A large amount of building debris was constantly falling. People were already running around in front of her, and sometimes someone would be hit by the rubble. Meng Lianai was stunned and stood there blankly. But at this moment, the tall building next to her suddenly cracked as a whole, as if it was struck by lightning. There was a loud crack. Ah! Various terrified shouts were heard. The building actually collapsed directly and fell towards Meng Lianai. At this moment, looking at the collapsed high-rise building, Meng Lianai opened her eyes wide. At that moment, she seemed to have seen death. At this moment, a white light suddenly flashed, and a figure fell from the sky and fell into the crowd. Then there was another flash. Meng Lianai disappeared on the spot. When Meng Lianai reacted, she was already in Li Ming's arms, with white wings flashing quickly, and Li Ming was flying out of the city. Meng Lianai raised his head slightly and glanced at Li Ming. At this time, there was no aversion to Li Ming in his eyes. Li Ming seemed to be a hero in his mind. Since the moment Li Ming saved his seriously ill father, Meng Lianai had no other opinion of Li Ming. The Liuan wings behind him flashed quickly, and Li Ming's flying speed reached the limit. The speed of the Liuan wings at the limit was amazing. It was like a white light shuttling through the low altitude of the city. In this building area full of obstacles, Li Ming's speed that reached the limit could be fully exerted by relying on his own strong mental power. Li Ming's body could naturally withstand this speed, but Meng Lianai could not resist it. The faster the speed, the more friction with the air would be generated. Ordinary objects would even disintegrate directly under this unpredictable situation. Of course, Li Ming used the golden light of the magic shield to completely protect Meng Lianai, thus avoiding the tragedy. For Li Ming, there is another way to quickly leave this area, which is to use teleportation. But Li Ming is not sure about teleporting with a low-level life, so he can only fly as hard as he can. Hal Monkey in the sky also opened his eyes wide with surprise, watching the purple light being suppressed. But under the pressure, a white light flew out at a high speed like a white rocket with a long tail. Chapter 504, Battle Against Level 2 Civilization. The ultra-fast Liuan Wing also opened Hal Meng's eyes, but Hal Meng didn't want to let Li Ming go just like that, and pressed down with his right hand again. The original purple light suddenly lit up, speeding up the downward speed. At this time, the purple light was only 100 meters away from the ground, and there was no building standing in the entire construction area. All of them turned into rubble and scattered all over the ground. As for the humans in the city, they were lying on the ground and unable to move under the pressure. Most of the humans died when the buildings collapsed. A few humans drove to leave, but as the pressure suddenly increased, the cars were instantly crushed, and some exploded directly. The tires also exploded directly. Those who were lying on the ground and unable to move could only watch all this happen. The rubble around them continued to crack, and the flesh and clothes on their bodies also collapsed. The ground began to sink, like a huge palm slapping down. At this time, Li Ming had come to the edge of the purple light, and the pressure also directly affected Li Ming's flying speed. Even the golden magic shield on Meng Lianai's body began to buzz and became a little unstable. Li Ming's eyes had already noticed all this. He clenched his teeth and looked into the distance. He was getting closer and closer to the edge of the purple light. At this moment, Li Ming was almost flying close to the ground. The pressure was so great that one could imagine it. The purple light was like a heavy machine, trying to crush everything below into powder. At this time, Li Ming had already used all his strength to fly out desperately, and the golden shield was already rubbing against the ground. Meng Lianai was even more frightened and shouted loudly while covering her eyes, because in her opinion, she had already hit the ground, just like a car suddenly braking and rubbing against the ground. Ah! Let me go and run. Despite the fear, Meng Lianai still shouted like this. Hearing this voice, Li Ming's eyes turned and looked at the other party with a strange look. After shouting, Meng Lianai ignored the flying sand and stones in front of her and suddenly turned her eyes to look at Li Ming, saying, "Don't worry about me, run." Hearing this again, Li Ming smiled slightly, as if he had realized some wish, and whispered, "The fantasy has finally come true." As he spoke, he suddenly threw Meng Lianai in front of him with his right hand. Meng Lianai only felt a strong thrust coming from her body and flew in front of Li Ming. At this time, Meng Lianai was stunned, looking back at Li Ming with wide eyes, her eyeballs shaking slightly, and she looked like she was about to cry. Boom. A loud noise was heard, and Li Ming disappeared from Meng Lionai's sight at that moment. The purple light fell to the ground like a pot cover, and the earth trembled. In the entire area of the purple light, all the ground sank more than 10 meters deep. It was like a huge blunt object smashed a deep pit from the ground. Meng Lionai successfully flew out of the area covered by the purple light, and her body fell on the grass, but her eyes were looking at the huge pit in front of her. Her originally ruddy face was now pale. She stopped crying, but her tears could not stop flowing. After a few seconds, Meng Lionai seemed to come back to her senses, slowly stood up, and walked a few steps to the edge of the pit. At this time, her body was completely stiff. The bottom of the entire pit was an absolute plain. No matter what kind of object it was before, it had been completely crushed into particles at this moment. The purple light had completely disappeared, leaving only a flat pit. There was green smoke coming out of more, but there was no sign of life. You'd better stay away from that. If you fall, it will be very troublesome. Li Ming's voice came from behind. Meng Lionai was startled and turned around to see that Li Ming was standing on a rock far away from the grass. He was not injured at all. Seeing this scene, Meng Lionai's face showed a faint smile. The reason why Li Ming was able to come out safely was that he used the ability of teleportation while throwing Meng Lionai out. Fortunately, they both escaped without any danger. Meng Lionai wiped the tears from her face and looked at Li Ming happily. But at this moment, a figure in the sky had come over again. Li Ming's body tensed up, and he looked up. At this time, it was Hao Mengqi who was in the sky. He looked at the two people below and immediately saw the clues. He whispered, "So, it was to save the girl. Humph. In that case." Hao Mengqi's eyes seemed to be thinking about some plan. Li Ming's figure was slowly floating up at this moment. After looking at Meng Lionai below, he said, "You stay away." Meng Lionai turned around and ran away, while Li Ming stared at Hao Mengqi. Although there was a huge gap between the two in terms of civilization level, this gap was also narrowing little by little. First, Hao Mengqi's energy supply was not as good as Li Ming's. The energy missing in his body could not be replenished, while Li Ming had already recovered to his full strength. Second, Li Ming possesses 3 civilizations, 2 of which have the bonus of the 6th domain Mang Star clan, which is also the reason for narrowing this gap. The two looked at each other in the air, and Li Ming's eyeballs began to change slightly, and a Taconid eyeball gradually took shape. This is the ability of the 6th domain strengthened Star clan. The change in the eyeballs also indicates that Li Ming has used the 6th domain strengthened Star clan. Hao Mengqi was still arrogant despite the suppression of his civilization level. After a light snort, he moved his body and rushed straight to Li Ming. At this moment, Hao Mengqi's speed was different from before, and it was extremely fast, but the white shield on his body had disappeared. In the battle of the original universe, the white shield on Hao Mengqi's body was particularly powerful, and the sudden disappearance now was also strange. Li Ming's body flashed with golden light, and the golden magic shield naturally appeared. He moved and flew straight up. Bang! A muffled sound was heard, and the two of them collided like 2 spheres. The powerful energy also spread out with the collision, and the scattered energy caused the surrounding space to fluctuate slightly, as if the vacuum had been deformed. Meng Lionai only ran to the distance, and occasionally turned her head to take a look, but she only saw the ripples of energy flashing in the sky, which was extremely strange. There was only the sound of collision, as if the sky was thundering, followed by flashing light, making the whole sky bright and dark. After several rounds, the two were also indistinguishable. But at this moment, Li Ming showed a look of joy, because when fighting with Hao Mengqi, Li Ming only used the energy in his body, and did not use other abilities, and just doing this could make him invincible, which also increased Li Ming's confidence. No matter what tricks Hao Mengqi had not used, Li Ming did not use up all his abilities, but only used the energy in his body to fight head on. After this fight, Hao Mengqi's brows began to frown, and his face was full of worry. According to the suppression of civilization level, the use of energy by the 2nd level civilization is absolutely not comparable to that of the 1st level civilization. The qualitative change of energy is very different only in the interval civilization, not to mention the cross level. But even so, Hao Mengqi still couldn't do anything to Li Ming. "It seems that you can't kill me," Li Ming said with a smug look on his face. While saying this, His body was naturally extremely cautious. In Li Ming's view, this sentence was just to see if the other party had any special means. Hull Menki gritted his teeth tightly, and his face was solemn, because Hull Menki really didn't have any special means. To deal with low-level civilizations, he relied entirely on the suppression of civilization level, and he didn't even have energy pills for replenishment. Looking at Li Ming with his eyes, he naturally had no way. Unable to kill Li Ming, if he continued to consume like this, he might even be killed by Li Ming. After thinking for a while, Hull Menki had already thought of retreating and running away. Li Ming was always paying attention to the other party's expression. The slightest changes on his face were all under Li Ming's observation. He looked at the other party with his eyes and smiled slightly. Judging from the other party's performance, this Hull Menki really didn't seem to have any special means. Hehe. Since you can't kill me, then I will kill you. Li Ming's eyes flashed with cold light, and he said this fiercely. Naturally, his inner killing intent was not concealed. Hull Menki was shocked when he heard this, and his hands were clenched tightly, and his teeth were also bitten together. Instant light. Li Ming's figure suddenly flashed and disappeared on the spot. When Li Ming appeared again, he was already behind the other party. Chapter 505, Giving You Destiny. The white blade of light was already in his hand, and he aimed it at Hull Meng's neck, which was a sure kill. The speed of the flash was too fast, and there was no chance to dodge. Hull Meng was shocked, and turned his body quickly, raising his hand to block it with his arm. Snap! The white blade of light passed through the air, and the whole arm was directly cut off. Li Ming narrowed his eyes slightly, his expression was solemn. The reaction speed of this second-level civilization was really amazing. He could turn around and block it immediately in a flash. The arm was broken, and Hull Meng had no time to think, and hurriedly retreated to avoid it. But at this moment, white light suddenly flashed in the surrounding air, and strips of light blades appeared out of thin air. Each light blade was more than 3 meters long, and there were more than a dozen of them. This airspace was also covered by light blades. It can be said that the light blades have wrapped this area. Hull Meng, who realized this, gradually turned pale, but it was too late. Li Ming snorted lightly and waved the light blade in his right hand. Suddenly, these dozen light blades flashed slightly and went straight to Hull Meng. In a hurry, the energy on Hormonchi's body surface turned over, and at this critical moment of life and death, he used the previous white light shield again. A series of sounds of bang 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 were heard, and the light blades shot towards Hormonchi like bullets, but they exploded and disappeared after touching the white light shield on his body surface. More than a dozen light blades disappeared at once. Although they resisted the attack of the light blades, Hormonchi's light shield began to flicker and become unstable. The energy is seriously insufficient. Is it really going to be taken away by this guy? Hormonchi looked worried, thinking in his mind, and his eyes turned to look at Meng Lianai not far away. That girl, it seems that this is the only way. Whispering this, Hormonchi already had his own ideas in his heart. When Hormonchi's eyes looked at Meng Lianai, Li Ming also noticed it from the side, and felt a little bad. After all, if the opponent attacked Meng Lianai, it would be very troublesome. With his eyes wide open, Li Ming's figure suddenly moved. Then kill him, before he makes a move. Thinking in his mind, Li Ming's flying figure disappeared in the air. It was a second instant slash. Hull Menki naturally noticed Li Ming's attack, and a white light flashed on his body. Before he could do anything, Li Ming had already appeared behind him, holding the white lightsaber in his hand high, aiming at Hull Menki and slashing directly. Snap! Crisp and sharp. Li Ming's attack was very successful, and Hull Menki's head was chopped off in one go. Such a smooth success made Li Ming feel a little surprised, and even felt a little abnormal. Hull Menki's body had not fallen yet, and a white light suddenly shot out from his body, and went straight to Meng Lianai. Ah! Li Ming's face changed suddenly when he saw the white light, and his body moved, and the lightsaber in his hand was thrown out. The light blade flashed and hit the white light, but a strange scene happened. The light blade just pierced through the white light and then fell to the ground with a boom sound. The white light was not affected at all. After a few flashes, it came to Meng Lianai's side and disappeared into her brain. Seeing this scene, Li Ming's body was stunned. Could that be? Li Ming seemed to have thought of something, but Meng Lianai closed her eyes and fainted. Li Ming hurriedly flew over and looked at Meng Lianai, who fell to the ground, frowning. Hal Monch's consciousness actually entered Meng Lianai's body. This, whispering in his mouth, Li Ming concentrated on thinking. Li Ming knew very well that consciousness invasion was one of the ways for advanced civilizations to escape. The reason why Li Ming obtained spiritual civilization was that the consciousness of alien civilization entered his body, but this consciousness was backfired by Li Ming. But the current situation is obviously very different. The nebula-shattering escape of high-level civilizations is mainly in the case of accidents during advancement, because the physical body will be damaged during advancement, but the consciousness will not be damaged, so it will wander and disappear. Only a small part of the consciousness will enter the universe. However, Hal Monkey's operation was obviously beyond Li Ming's cognition, because Hal Monkey controlled his consciousness to leave his body on his own, which was an act that Li Ming could not understand. It might be due to some special star origin, or it might be a cognitive ability unique to the second level civilization. Although he could not figure it out, Li Ming could not let Meng Lianai become his host body. With a flip of his right hand, a green light flashed in his palm, and a small green dragon had already emerged. He looked at Meng Lianai with his eyes, and then clapped his hands, injecting the green dragon into Meng Lianai's brain. In Meng Lianai's brain, his own consciousness was already competing with Hal Monkey, but his consciousness could not compare with the other party at all, and could only be eroded little by little. The invasion of consciousness cannot, especially for spiritual civilization, but it is very difficult to invade the brain and occupy the body, because the connection between the body and the brain of a life increases with growth. According to Meng Lianai's age, his brain is basically bound to the body. At this time, if he wants to get his body, he needs to occupy his brain consciousness first, and then erode and merge it into the invader's consciousness, so that he can slowly complete the occupation in the remaining time. When Li Ming's consciousness was invaded, he was unconscious for a whole night. However, the consciousness that invaded Li Ming had been drifting in the universe for too long, and the strength of consciousness was naturally greatly weakened, which caused Li Ming to backfire. But now it is different. Hal Monga's consciousness has just left his body and entered Meng Lianai's brain. It can be said that Hal Monga's consciousness is a complete invasion, which is naturally extremely powerful and ordinary humans cannot compete with it. Hal Monga chose this move to save his life, but he had carefully considered choosing Meng Lianai, because Hal Monga can completely control consciousness to find a more suitable life to invade, but Meng Lianai is different. Li Ming just risked his life to rescue her. Therefore, Li Ming will not attack her. This invasion of Meng Lianai is more suitable for Hal Monga. But Hal Monga still ignored Li Ming's ability, because Li Ming has no opponent in terms of consciousness. As King Lang entered Meng Lianai's brain, Li Ming's consciousness began to become active rapidly. At this time, Meng Lianai's brain looked like a glowing light bulb, and the neural circuits in the brain began to flash like tungsten filaments. However, the faint light was a struggle between consciousnesses. The ownership of this body began to be fought in his brain. If it was just Meng Lianai's consciousness, it would naturally be unable to resist. However, with the addition of Li Ming, it was as if a powerful force was adding fuel to the flames. This made Meng Lianai's consciousness, which was about to be swallowed, suddenly become stronger. Hal Monkey could never have imagined that Li Ming, a multi-civilized life, had reached such a level that the ability of casual wisdom civilization could not defeat Li Ming, and the spiritual civilization was even more self-defeating. With the blessing of the 6 domains Manxing Hukang and Huan, these two civilizations were naturally few people could defeat them. However, this was not the limit. According to what Lan Jingzhang said at the beginning, Li Ming's ability could continue to develop greater potential and power closer to the limit. After a moment, Li Ming took his palm away from Meng Lianai's forehead, looked at Meng Lianai who was still unconscious, and breathed a sigh of relief. It can be regarded as a victory over Hal Monkey's consciousness, but Li Ming's face began to show a solemn look. Meng Lianai has devoured Hal Monkey's consciousness, which means that Meng Lianai's cognition will grow rapidly, and she will become a higher existence than human civilization, just like me. As he spoke, Li Ming's face sank slightly, and he was actually thinking about something. After watching for a while, Li Ming flipped his right hand took out a star bag, and then put the star bag on Meng Lianai's body. Then he stood up, sighed for a long time, flew into the air, and left directly. Li Ming left the remaining nebula power and nebula pill to Meng Lianai. As for whether Meng Lianai could embark on the path of pursuing a higher civilization, Li Ming would not care. Besides, this universe is not the universe where Li Ming was originally from. The other party's experience will inevitably be very different from his own. Everything can only depend on the arrangement of fate. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 506 Confidence. At this moment, what Li Ming had to do was to find a way to leave this planet, leave this parallel universe, and return to his original universe. Just now, when helping Meng Lianai fight against Hal Meng's consciousness, Li Ming gained some of Hal Meng's cognition. After all, Li Ming was extremely powerful in this aspect of consciousness. The cognition in this consciousness contained information about the parallel universe. It is not so easy to enter the parallel universe. Even a second level civilization cannot do it. The development level of the second level civilization is not enough to shuttle through the parallel universe, but the cognition and research on the parallel universe are much more than that of the first level civilization. It was a complete accident that Li Ming and Hal Meng could enter the parallel universe. After the collision of two powerful energies, an energy magnetic field was generated, and a blue hole that could shuttle through the universe was generated with a probability of 1 in a billion. This sucked the two people in together. If this is the case, then there should be a blue hole in this universe. Since it fell on this planet, this blue hole should not be too far away. Thinking of this, Li Ming looked up at the sky and his flying speed also increased a bit. In the outer space of the water ball, a dark red space crack is shrinking little by little, and this is the space crack. Li Ming relies on the powerful energy and Liu Wing to slowly fly out of the water ball. At this time, in the space station in outer space, you can see Li Ming's flying figure, but the speed is too fast, just like a flash of white light. The angle of the space station has the function of shooting, and Li Ming's figure is also completely recorded. Although the people in the space station did not notice it at the moment, they will definitely find this unidentified flying object in the future. The dark red crack entered Li Ming's eyes at once. Under his wisdom, the energy operation of the crack is under Li Ming's sight. In the eyes of ordinary people, this may be a huge energy ball, but in Li Ming's eyes, it is more like a complex energy activity body. This is a little similar to an ordinary portal, but the energy operation is more complicated than that of an ordinary portal. It should be this. Li Ming's eyes are fixed on the dark red crack, and the golden light on his body has been surging. When the space crack was formed, it was only 100 meters long and wide, but as it was consumed and shrunk, it is only about 20 to 30 meters at this moment. For the vast universe, this is very small and insignificant. Although it is small in size, its energy is very huge, just like the brightest star in the night sky. It is not big, but it can quickly attract attention, and Li Ming's eyes are very sensitive to energy bodies. After determining the location, Li Ming narrowed his eyes slightly, accelerated his flying speed, and headed straight for the dark red crack. The closer he got to the crack, the clearer the powerful energy became. When Li Ming was absorbed by the blue hole before, his consciousness was directly eroded by this energy and fainted. This time, Li Ming naturally had to be more fully prepared. The golden light of the magic shield on the surface of the body became thicker, like a golden egg. Looking at the crack that was getting closer and closer, Li Ming gritted his teeth and rushed straight in. But a muffled sound came out, and the golden magic shield seemed to fall into the water. The dark red crack also rippled like a horizontal surface, and then sank into it and disappeared. Corresponding to the dark red crack was the blue hole of the original universe. At this time, the blue hole was only a few dozen meters long and wide, and not far from the blue hole, a spaceship was flying slowly. In the main cabin of the spaceship, two aliens were discussing something. One of them was Alvarez and the other was Meteor. Li Ming was not unfamiliar with the name Alvarez. When he rescued Gabby on the Sprague star, Li Ming joined forces with Alvarez. He originally wanted to use him to attract the attention of the Triangulum Galaxy, but he didn't expect to be used instead. It was also in that battle that Alvarez successfully obtained Guoshang, laying the foundation for the Light of Destruction in the future. Alvarez was a member of the Star Plunder group hired by the Geno civilization. As the largest star plundering group near the Andromeda Galaxy, the Great Demon Star Plunder Group could do anything for the sake of profit. Meteor was one of the senior members of the Great Demon Star Plunder Group. He wore a white feather coat on his upper body and a black dress on his lower body. The lower part of his two arms was connected to a long cuff, as if the sleeves grew on his arms. There were no shoes on his feet, revealing 3 toes, covered with scales, like eagle claws. At this time, the spaceship stopped near the blue hole, and the operating table was also full of blue holes in front of him. I've never seen this thing before, but there's a lot of energy in it. If it can be used, it will be a lot of wealth. Yunai looked at the operating table and said thoughtfully. Alvarez nodded again and again, and said, then let's get closer, and take a look. Yunai shook his head slightly, hesitated for a moment, and said, no, our current goal is to go to Changsheng Galaxy to attend the Cheyenne Conference. That's a serious matter. Let's temporarily write down the coordinates here. After the matter of Changsheng Galaxy is dealt with, we will come back to see what's going on. Alvarez replied, okay. The two of them said this and prepared to leave this place, but just as they were about to start the spacecraft, a faint light suddenly flashed on the operating table, and a golden object flew out of the blue hole in the screen. This made Yunai pause and look over. I saw that the golden object quickly picked up after leaving the blue hole, just like something spit out of the blue hole, and continued to fly away under this inertia. Quick, chase it. Yunai made a prompt decision and ordered immediately. Alvarez did not dare to hesitate, and immediately controlled the spaceship to fly towards the golden object. The huge energy body of the blue hole had already attracted the attention of meteorite rain, and the object that flew out of the blue hole at this time was even more important to see. The golden object that flew out of the blue hole was Li Ming. The golden color was Li Ming's magic shield. At this moment, Li Ming was thrown out of the blue hole and kept using energy to stop, but it was naturally impossible to stop immediately. Li Ming could only reduce the speed little by little under this inertia. Li Ming flew slower and slower, but meteorite rain spaceship was extremely fast. With one fast and one slow, they caught up in a short while. I saw a flash of light on the side of the spaceship, and a blue beam of light shot out. The beam was like a flashlight, and immediately enveloped Li Ming. This beam of light was the teleportation ladder. Before the teleportation ability was activated, it also had the function of fixing objects, just like an arm. This technology was not uncommon. The previous spherical cruise bay had this ability. Under the influence of the blue beam, Li Ming's figure stopped immediately. Sensing the energy of the transmission ladder, Li Ming was also a little surprised. He glanced and saw the spaceship not far away. Yunai on the spaceship was also startled and said in astonishment, what? How can it be a person? Alvarez also looked at it in disbelief, but under the golden light of the magic shield, he could only vaguely see the shadow of a person and could not see the face clearly. Without waiting for the two to look carefully, Li Ming's figure paused and followed the blue light to the spaceship. It is extremely important for Li Ming to have a spaceship. After all, without a spaceship, Li Ming would not know where to drift in this vacuum universe. Seeing Li Ming flying towards the spaceship, Yunai's face changed immediately, and he immediately said, quickly close the transmission ladder. Alvarez also hurried to operate, but it was obviously too late. Li Ming's powerful mental power had already controlled the entire spaceship, and the spaceship was no longer controlled by others. After a flash, the blue beam disappeared, and the golden light on Li Ming's body gradually faded, and he was already in the main cabin of the spaceship. Li Ming's sudden appearance made Yunai and Alvarez excited, and they looked at Li Ming in surprise. The two looked up and down at Li Ming. When they sensed Li Ming's strength of 1.9 civilization, they shrank slightly and showed horror. Alvarez was only in the second interval, and although Yunai was a 1.8 civilization, he was still afraid of Li Ming's height. Li Ming narrowed his eyes slightly, and after looking at the two, his calm face became slightly solemn. A lot of information had entered Li Ming's mind. He came to the operating table and sat down gently, looking at the two again. This time, his eyes widened a little, and the powerful consciousness hummed completely enveloped the entire main cabin. At present, Li Ming is already the highest existence in the first level civilization. He does not need to fear any opponent. Even Halmonshi of the second level civilization was killed by him, which further increased Li Ming's confidence. The powerful consciousness is directly and recklessly checking the content that he is interested in from the two people's minds. Chapter 507 Cheyenne Conference. In front of the powerful spiritual civilization ability, Yunai and Alvarez had no resistance, and Li Ming also used the active ability of the Wisdom Eye. Even if the two felt that Li Ming was invading their consciousness, they could do nothing. After checking, Li Ming's face changed slightly, and it looked a little ugly. Cheyenne Conference? 4 words came out of Li Ming's mouth fiercely. Yunai paused after hearing this, looked at Alvarez beside him, and then looked at Li Ming, a little at a loss. Taking a deep breath, Li Ming's expression returned to normal, and his eyes also looked at Alvarez. Alvarez didn't know Li Ming, because Cottrell was in charge of the joint negotiations on Sprague's star, but Li Ming knew this person. He was used by this person at the beginning, and now thinking about it, Li Ming still felt resentful. However, Li Ming was not in a hurry to resolve the grievances between individuals, because a big thing was about to happen in the Cheyenne Star region, that is, the Cheyenne Conference. From the information in the minds of the two people, Li Ming learned that the Cheyenne Conference was a meeting in the Changsheng Galaxy against the Cheyenne Water. Since the end of the War of Light of Destruction, all forces have begun to plan this matter and have notified the Cheyenne Guard. The meeting was attended by the Triangulum Galaxy, the Great Demon Star Plunder Group, the Jinro Civilization, the Nusu Civilization, the Lahu Civilization, and the Andromeda Galaxy. Many forces will jointly enter the Changsheng Galaxy to directly negotiate with the Cheyenne Guard and divide the existing Cheyenne Water. Once the Cheyenne Guard refuses, these forces will jointly invade and divide the Cheyenne Water. The Meteorite and Alvarez in front of them are representatives of the Great Demon Star Plunder Group, and the current area is in the Cheyenne Star region, not far from the Changsheng Galaxy. Knowing this information, Li Ming's face became ugly again and again. After looking at the Meteorite coldly, he said, "The Cheyenne Guard has guarded the Cheyenne Star region for many years, and the Cheyenne Water has also accumulated little by little. You people say that you want to divide it. Isn't it unreasonable?" Although the tone is calm, it reveals a huge murderous aura. This made Yunai and Alvarez startled. Yunai rolled his eyes, thought for a while, and said, "This is a joint action of major forces. Although our Great Demon Star Plunder Group is a participant, we are just joining in the fun, not the initiator." Yunai sensed a sense of crisis from Li Ming's tone, as if there was some important relationship between Li Ming and the Cheyenne Guard, or Li Ming was a member of the Cheyenne Guard. This made Yunai and Alvarez more cautious. Li Ming still sat calmly in front of the operating table, raised his hand and lightly tapped to determine the coordinates of the Changsheng Galaxy, but he didn't say a word. The Changsheng Galaxy is located in the Cheyenne Star region, the inner system of the Andromeda Galaxy. The Meridian star in this star system is the headquarters of the Cheyenne Guard and the gathering point of this Cheyenne Conference. According to the information Li Ming has already obtained, the Cheyenne Guard has reached a preliminary consensus with the alliance of forces, and it is this consensus that has promoted the formation of this meeting. The content of the meeting is mainly about the division of the Cheyenne Water. For the Cheyenne Guards, it is their mission to defend the water of the Cheyenne River to the death, but to deal with the attacks of many forces at the same time. It is devastating for the entire Cheyenne Star region. At this time, even Li Ming couldn't figure out how these forces reached a consensus. Because among these forces, there are also hatreds and war disputes between each other, such as the huge hatred between the Jinro civilization and the Andromeda Galaxy, because the Jinro civilization was also a member of the Andromeda Galaxy, but was later driven out by the base civilization. This hatred is not the relationship between the Andromeda Galaxy and the Triangulum Galaxy. The latter is at most a local interest dispute. But even with such a complex relationship between forces, these people still gathered together. Li Ming had to sigh that this situation and this scene really fulfilled the saying that there are no eternal friends or enemies, only eternal interests. If it was before, Li Ming would not intervene in such matters, but now it is different. Li Ming's 1.9 level civilization has already surpassed the third interval, plus the relationship between Li Ming and Guoji, so when they meet each other, Li Ming must still stand on the side of the Cheyenne guards. Before, Li Ming might have been worried about what Lan Jingzhang said, that he might be sanctioned by the second level civilization, but since Holmonshi was dead, Li Ming naturally acted recklessly. Li Ming controlled the spacecraft to approach the Changsheng galaxy little by little. At the same time, a large number of spacecraft had gathered in the space near Meridian. On a piece of land on Meridian, the venue for this meeting was already waiting for the arrival of the participants. The people already in the venue were 3 people from the Cheyenne Guard, led by Captain Mu Hua, and the other 2 were Guoji and Jizin. The Cheyenne Guard was naturally not these few people, but in this meeting, the appearance of other people would only make the situation more tense. The sky under the sun gradually darkened, not because of the dark clouds covering the sun, but because a large number of spacecraft had approached. The spacecrafts of various forces were like dark clouds, slowly floating in the air, making the bottom slightly dark. The venue was open air, like a huge sports center. Each force had its own corresponding position, and the distance between them was also very far, but there were image transmission equipment next to the seats, so this distance was naturally not an obstacle. Mu Hua raised her head slightly and looked at the sky. Her solemn expression did not change much. The spaceship stopped in the nearby airspace, and then beams of light shot out from the spaceship. The beams of light were blue, which were the transmission ladders. There were 1 or 2 aliens in each beam of light, who were representatives from various forces. The positions that had been distributed were gradually filled with people as these aliens arrived. There were 3 representatives of the Triangulum Galaxy, Kanban, Zhaoxu, and Zuan. There was 1 representative of the Jino civilization, Nakoran, 1 representative of the Nusu civilization, Hangban Zuang, 1 representative of the Andromeda Galaxy, Queen Yus, and 2 representatives of the Lahu civilization, Cuban and Lion Bo. However, no one from the Great Demon Realm Star Sweeping group who had signed up for the meeting had arrived yet, and everyone just checked on each other, and did not care. After Mu Hua's eyes swept through the crowd, his eyes looked at an empty position, where the representatives of the Great Demon Realm Star Sweeping group who had not yet arrived were, and he just glanced at them contemptuously, and then his eyes looked at the others. At this time, Nakoran smiled lightly and said, "Can we start the meeting?" Mu Hua still said nothing, and looked at the others again. The others also looked at each other. The strength of the Great Demon Realm Star Plundering Group is no less than any single force present. It is not good to ignore it directly, but if one force is missing, it means that other forces can get more water from the Cheyenne River. Hangbing Suayang nodded slightly and said, "Although the Great Demon Realm Star Plundering Group is very powerful, it is a star plundering group after all. I think we should start our meeting first." As soon as this sentence came out, the other forces nodded one after another. Seeing this, Mu Hua opened her mouth slightly with a cold expression and said, "The water of the Cheyenne River is a treasure of our Naxi civilization. We are willing to share some of it with you, hoping to calm down this war." Nakaran snorted and said, "Mu Hua, although your Cheyenne Guard is powerful, if you resist our alliance, you will only end up destroyed. Don't you consider the entire Naxi civilization?" Mu Hua turned her eyes and looked at Nakaran. Hong Ben Zuang on the side said, "Today, everyone can sit here peacefully. I think everyone's status is the same. The water of the Cheyenne River is a natural product of the universe. It is most reasonable to take it all out and divide it equally." Mu Hua heard what the 2 said, but did not respond immediately. She just turned her eyes and looked at the others. The other forces remained silent and did not express any opinions. Everyone present understood that, if someone was willing to take the lead, that would be the best thing. After all, someone had to bring it up. Mu Hua's solemn expression clearly showed that she did not agree with this view. Before Mu Hua made any move, Jizin beside him suddenly said, "We can offer half of the Cheyenne water, which is our greatest sincerity for this meeting. If we offer all of it, then we will destroy our entire Naxi civilization without a doubt." Chapter 508, Killing the Chicken to Frighten the Monkey. "Who do you think you are? Is it your turn to speak here?" Cuban of Lahu civilization suddenly shouted. Jizin was furious and was about to refute again, but Mu Hua raised her hand to stop him. After a slight sigh, she said, if. Before she could finish, there was a sudden buzzing sound in the sky, and a spaceship suddenly teleported here. This spaceship was the spaceship of Unimaginable. The sudden appearance immediately attracted everyone's attention. The Great Demon Realm Star Sweeping Group, Zazu of the Triangulum Galaxy, raised his head slightly and took a look. I saw a beam of light shooting down from the bottom of the spaceship, and then a figure slowly descended from it. Before I could see his face clearly, the white cloak had already appeared. The person coming was Li Ming. Li Ming, who was gradually falling, attracted the attention of others. Li Ming's face was familiar to many people present, and it brought more fear to everyone. The breath of 1.9 level civilization spread out, and everyone present could clearly sense it. The most important thing was that Li Ming's familiar face made several of them open their eyes wide. The faces of Cuban and Lianbo of Lahu civilization changed slightly. They knew Li Ming's strength very well. After looking at each other, they shrank slightly. Is it him? Jixin was suddenly startled and said excitedly. Mu He had only heard of Li Ming, but had never seen him. After hearing what Jixin said beside him, he turned his head and looked at Jixin. Jixin hurriedly said again, this is the Li Ming I mentioned. Mu He turned his eyes and looked at Li Ming again. Ikuji also looked at Li Ming intently and whispered, this guy came here. Could it be for? Under the gaze of everyone, Li Ming's figure fell in the middle of the venue. The water of Cheyenne is the foundation of Cheyenne Star region. How can you, a bunch of rabble, unite and divide it? Li Ming said coldly, his face was full of coldness. As soon as these words came out, the field instantly became quiet. Lianbo and Cuban, who were familiar with Li Ming's fighting power, did not say a word, and did not dare to make any moves. Hangban Zhuang of Nusu civilization did not dare to have too many objections. Nakoran of the Jino civilization also became serious. After all, Li Ming was a 1.9 level civilization. This strength was still intimidating. In the entire field, there was another person with a 1.9 level civilization besides Li Ming, and that was Queen Yuz. Li Ming's words shocked everyone, which made Yuz look dissatisfied. It seems that you are planning to force your way out. Yuz stood up slowly and said. This sentence also attracted Li Ming's attention. He turned his eyes to look at the other party. He just glanced casually, then snorted and said, what? Do you have any objections? Yuz did not get angry directly. He glanced around and looked at the others and said, we are all third level civilizations. Can you handle so many of us alone? After saying this, all the major forces also looked at Li Ming again. The situation became tense. Yuz turned his eyes again and looked at Mu Hua in the distance and said, Mu Hua, why don't you come out and say something fair? If this kid can represent your Cheyenne Guard, then we can solve this matter in our own way. By that time, we won't be sitting here talking like we are now. Yuz's cold voice soon reached Mu Hua's ears. Mu Hua's face suddenly changed. Obviously, if Li Ming was allowed to act recklessly and caused a war, the entire Naxi civilization would be in great danger. Thinking of this, Mu Hua glanced at Ikuji beside him and whispered, Ikuji, don't let Li Ming do anything stupid. Ikuji bowed his head and stood up. Just as he was about to say something, Li Ming suddenly laughed up to the sky. Ha 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 ha. The hearty laughter resounded through the sky, shocking everyone. Mu Hua's thoughts and the conversation with Ikuji were all under the control of Li Ming's consciousness. Since Li Ming decided to stand up for the Cheyenne water, how could he stop? The figure slowly flew up. After laughing, Li Ming then said, the water of Cheyenne River and Yi energy are in my hands. Don't you want them? Come to me. As soon as these words came out, everyone was shocked. Even Mu Hua and Ikuji looked up in surprise. Li Ming smiled and continued to scan the people below, but these people showed strange looks. Even Yuze began to focus on Li Ming. Just when everyone focused their attention on Li Ming slowly raised his right hand, and an energy ball began to condense in his palm, shining white light, dazzling and dazzling. What is this guy going to do? Jizun suddenly stood up. Ikuji stared at Li Ming with a solemn expression. He turned his eyes and looked at Mu Hua, saying, Captain, Li Ming is my good friend. Even he is willing to stand up for us. Are we so weak? Mu Hua frowned and looked at Li Ming again. Under the siege of many forces, the strong Cheyenne guards had already shown weakness, but Li Ming stood up bravely. This move really moved the entire Cheyenne guards. But Li Ming's ability to do this is precisely because of his confidence in his own abilities. Otherwise, Li Ming would not do such a thing. Yuz looked at Li Ming angrily and glanced at Mu Hua. At this time, Mu Hua was still a little hesitant. HMPH. Then I'll kill you first. As soon as the voice fell, Yuz flew up and ran straight to Li Ming. Seeing that Yuz was about to take action, Li Ming's mouth corners slightly raised and his right hand aimed at him and slapped him fiercely, and a strong energy aura immediately suppressed him. With a muffled sound of hum, Yuz, who had not yet approached Li Ming, felt his body tightened and his whole body could not move, which made Yuz's face suddenly change. After a few seconds, the air around Yuz's body suddenly circulated with golden light, and a golden arm held Yuz firmly in his hand. Although they were both 1.9 level civilizations, the difference in energy was 3 times as much. In addition, Li Ming cultivated a rare star, which was not something that ordinary people could handle. At this time, the aliens from other forces on the field were all shocked and opened their eyes wide. The people present were basically civilizations in the third interval. The energy quality of civilizations in the same interval was the same, and the only difference was the size. However, Yuz, a 1.9 level civilization, was instantly subdued after encountering Li Ming. Li Ming slowly raised his left hand, pointed it at the sky and patted it lightly, with his palm facing up, as if he was holding something. The corners of his mouth slightly raised, and he said, "Magic shield field." As soon as the 4 words came out, with a hum, the golden magic shield immediately covered the entire conference venue. Li Ming looked at Yuz, who had been completely controlled, coldly, shook his head, and said, "With this little strength, you still want to take the water of the Cheyenne River? Why?" As soon as the voice fell, the golden big hand suddenly clenched. Snap. Yuz was like a small insect flying in my hand. In this sudden grip, it broke and shattered directly. It was instantly bloody and blurred, just like a ball of liquid being squeezed and exploded. As soon as this move was made, the whole strange long moment was silent. Actually killed Queen Yuz. Zhao Zhu of the Triangulum Galaxy stammered and said this. And Kanban beside him was even more pale, saying, "Queen Yuz is a non-advanced 1.9 civilization, and she was suddenly." The breath of fear spread all at once. Li Ming's move was enough to completely shock everyone on the scene. They dared not say a word and could only tremble in place. Li Ming looked at the remaining few people with contempt and said, "Now, which force still wants the water of the Milky Way?" Naturally, no one answered this question, and several people shook their heads repeatedly. Li Ming's eyes turned and stopped first on Cuban of the Lahu civilization. Then he threw his hand and a golden palm suddenly grabbed it. Cuban's face also changed, and he looked a little panicked. Lianbo, who was standing beside him, was about to stand up to stop him, but he saw that his body was also tightened, and another golden hand also tightly grasped him. HMPH. After a light hum, Li Ming's right hand suddenly clenched hard. Bang. The two were crushed instantly like Yuz. Cuban turned into metal slag, with only a small piece of biological tissue liquid left, and Lianbo was directly crushed. At this time, the other people on the field shrank even more, with worried expressions on their faces. Chapter 509, Li Yuzuan's whereabouts. The atmosphere of terror spread throughout the conference hall. At this time, everyone would be the lambs to be slaughtered, and Li Ming was the butcher. In the field of the golden magic shield, the people in front of him were all targets that Li Ming could slaughter at any time, but Li Ming had no intention of doing it. Li Ming knew how to kill the chicken to scare the monkey. Among all the powers, the strongest was the Lahu civilization, and the next was Queen Yuz. These 3 had been killed by Li Ming. The Cheyenne Star region is sacred and inviolable. Whoever dares to covet the water of the Cheyenne Star region and step into the Cheyenne Star region will end up like this. As soon as the voice fell, Li Ming's eyes swept over the crowd again. At this time, the major forces naturally had no greed at all. In front of life, those greeds must be redundant. The only thing that matters is being able to survive. The Cheyenne Guard itself is a powerful organization that ordinary forces cannot shake at all. This unexpected great alliance did threaten the Cheyenne Guard, but it was different at this time. The appearance of Li Ming broke the fantasy of these people. Looking at the expressions of these people, the wise eyes have already detected their true thoughts. After confirming that these people no longer have any thoughts about the water of the Cheyenne River, Li Ming's mouth corners slightly raised, and he waved his left hand again. With a buzz, the magic shield field disappeared directly. Li Ming looked at the people on the field indifferently and shouted, "Why don't you get out?" As soon as this voice fell, these people looked at Li Ming in horror, and after hesitating for a while, they began to stand up and prepare to leave. Watching these people leave tremblingly, Li Ming's eyes looked at Jianjizin and then flew away. In less than a moment, the spaceships parked in the sky left one by one, just like the dispersing dark clouds disappeared one by one, and the spaceship Li Ming was still the spaceship of the meteorite rain. After confirming that other forces had left, Li Ming activated the transmission button. After leaving Meridian Star, Li Ming's worries were also settled. Looking at this planet from space, Li Ming took a deep breath and turned to the operating table. At this time, Li Ming was the only one in the main cabin. As for Unido and Alvarez, they had been expelled from the spacecraft by Li Ming. Giving them a lifeboat was very kind. Andromeda Galaxy Li Ming didn't want to stay any longer because he wanted to pursue his dream, achieve the highest civilization. It was even more difficult for Li Ming at this level to continue to advance. Breaking through the bottleneck and entering a higher civilization, Li Ming's cognition had automatically obtained relevant information, which was also information that could only be obtained when reaching level 1.9 civilization. To enter the second level civilization from level 1.9, 1 Liu Yan and 1 Zingayan Silly were acquired, but this was only the way ordinary aliens advanced. Li Ming had 3 civilizations, so the materials he used were 3 times more than others. Advanced materials are often extremely scarce, especially this kind of cross-level materials, which is different from interval advanced materials. The scarcity of interval advanced materials is because the civilizations in the 3 intervals need them, while the level advanced materials are completely controlled. Advanced civilizations will not easily allow low-level civilizations to advance, and the control of materials is extremely strict. Simply put, Liuan itself is very scarce. Even if someone is lucky enough to obtain it, after entering the 1.9 level civilization, it will be noticed by advanced civilizations, such as the Cheyenne organization. At this time, it is very dangerous, and the road to advancement is very slim. Li Ming sat in the spaceship. He was not in a hurry to advance. At present, Li Ming needed to comprehend the potential and extreme that Lun Jingzhang said, as well as the ability to stabilize the 1.9 level civilization. The spaceship was flying, but in the distant starry universe, on another spaceship, 2 people were talking in front of the operating table. One of the 2 people was white-haired with a long beard, and his whole head was covered with white hair. The other was wearing golden armor, and even his hair was golden. A light spot flashed on the operating table. The white-haired old man pointed at the light spot and lightly tapped it. The light spot was quickly enlarged. It was the spaceship driven by Li Ming. "Gao Yi, has Nei set off?" the white-haired old man said. The man in golden armor named Gao Yi nodded slightly and said, "Lord Lang Yi, Nei's is on the way." Lang Yi looked at him and nodded slightly, saying, "The mysterious disappearance of Hall Monshi may be related to this guy." Gao Yi was stunned, and after a little thought, he said, "You mean, this guy killed Hall Monshi?" Lang Yi waved his hand, took a deep breath, and said, "This possibility cannot be ruled out, although the probability is very low. Letting Naze go is to figure out this matter. Besides, Haozin is still missing, so it is not ruled out that he did it. Our Cheyenne Mu organization has not had such an accident. We were preparing to recruit new members, but now we have lost another one. Alas." Lang Yi said this while shaking his head and sighing. At this moment, Li Ming's spaceship has already headed straight for the Andromeda Galaxy. In order to pursue a higher civilization, Li Ming must first understand more unknowns. As the level of civilization increases, more information enters Li Ming's mind bit by bit. Li Ming's current location belongs to the edge of the Andromeda Galaxy. The Andromeda Galaxy is a member of the local group of galaxy. The closest to the local group of galaxy is the Virgo cluster of galaxy. There is no essential difference between galaxy clusters and galaxy groups. They are just different in number and size. They are all gathered together by mutual gravitational relationship. When the number of large galaxies like the Milky Way and the Andromeda galaxy is less than 100, it is called a galaxy group. When the number of large galaxies exceeds 100, it becomes a galaxy cluster, just like two groups. The group with fewer members is a group, and the group with more members is a group. There are too many unknowns in the vast universe. Being able to see a wider universe while advancing is like a beautiful view on the road to success. It is a very wonderful thing. It will not take too long to fly away from the Andromeda galaxy because there are teleportation coordinates, but after leaving the Andromeda galaxy, the safe coordinates will decrease or even disappear because that will be the distance limit for civilization exploration here. Unable to teleport, Li Ming set the spacecraft to fly, just to travel the universe to his heart's content. But Li Ming didn't know that a spaceship was rushing towards him. In front of the control panel in the spaceship, an alien in red armor showed a fierce look. His medium-sized body was covered with red light, as if his whole body was about to burn. "I'm going to catch you, boy." The fiery red eyes were full of anger. He stared at Li Ming's spaceship on the control panel and said fiercely. Li Ming, who left the Andromeda galaxy, continued to fly far away. This was still the area of the local galaxy group, and there were many crews based during the period. Because the local galaxy group is a cosmic phenomenon where some large galaxies gather together, Li Ming just left the Andromeda galaxy. If he wants to leave the local galaxy group, he still has a long way to go. Li Ming has no real purpose and goal, just traveling in space. During this period, Li Ming, in addition to practicing, was looking for information about Liu's whereabouts and the power of the clouds. The power of the clouds is even more powerful, and the energy contained in it is extremely powerful, but the biggest change is not the volume, but the quality. In terms of volume, one zinc iron force may only have as much as 100 Liu iron forces, but there is a world of difference in quality. If the zinc iron force is made into a weapon, it can destroy a planet with one blow, and it is even easier to destroy a civilization. This kind of power is not something that 100 Liu iron forces can do. It's as if 100 Liu iron forces and one zinc iron force are two explosives of equal weight. One can only blow up a house, while the other can blow up a building. This is the change in energy quality. Li Ming has no way of knowing how strong the second level civilization is. Without reaching that height, everything is just speculation and hearsay, but that is the height that Li Ming wants to reach after all. Through the cruise bay, Li Ming can obtain more safety coordinates, as well as more information and cognition. During this period, Li Ming really obtained the whereabouts of a Liuan. In a galaxy at the edge of the local group, there is a planet called Palans where a stream of stars exists. Of course, this news is only the information that Li Ming obtained through his wise eye, and this information may not be accurate, but as long as this information exists, Li Ming still has to go and see what is going on. Chapter 510 Ans. Perens, a lifeless planet, has a layer of ice all over its surface, like an ice ball. There are naturally many such celestial bodies in the universe, but they are not worth developing. Li Ming obtained the safe coordinates and headed straight for this planet. After a long teleportation and flight, the entire ice ball appeared on the console in front of Li Ming. This is the planet Perens. Looking at the phantom pattern on the console, the ice ball was slowly rotating. Li Ming also got the information about this planet from the nearby civilization, but the existence of liquid on this planet is really unimaginable and incredible. Looking at the planet in front of him, Li Ming raised his hand and lightly tapped the console to determine the target of the teleportation. The spacecraft shook for a while and disappeared on the spot with a buzz. When the spacecraft appeared again, it was already on the ice ball. The real environment of the ice ball immediately came into view. The surface of the planet was completely a thick layer of ice, and no other substances could be seen. Occasionally, a few rocks protruding from the ice surface could be seen, which showed that this planet Perens was not completely liquid, but also had rocks. The planet has no atmosphere, just like a bare glass ball flying in the universe. Li Ming drove the spaceship and began to fly along the surface of the planet. Wherever the spaceship flies, it will conduct strict scanning. This is the best way for the spaceship to explore and search. But after flying for only a short time, Li Ming in the main cabin stopped the spaceship and frowned slightly. The exploration distance of the equipment on the spaceship is limited, and the exploration ability is also very weak. Because of the special reasons of this planet, the exploration of the spaceship is interfered with, so it is impossible to use the spaceship for simple and fast exploration. This made Li Ming worried. Does it have to be me who goes up there myself? He whispered and touched his chin. After a little thought, Li Ming decided to land in person. A blue light flashed at the bottom of the spaceship, just like a searchlight suddenly lit up, and was turned off. Li Ming's white figure slowly flew out, and headed straight for the ice layer below. The temperature base of the entire planet. Li Ming could only use the energy in his body to keep warm, but as his body approached the surface of the planet little by little, Li Ming's eyes narrowed slightly. In his wisdom eyes, Li Ming saw a large area of weak radiation, which was invisible to the naked eye. It was like the interior of a planet was releasing some kind of substance. This radiation would naturally not affect Li Ming's body, but it could affect the spacecraft's detection of the planet. Seeing this, Li Ming understood and whispered, "No wonder the spacecraft cannot conduct a comprehensive detection. So this is the case." As he spoke, Li Ming's figure had already landed on the smooth ice surface. The blue ice layer was unknown how thick it was. The cold air continued to be released from the bottom. If there was no energy to protect his body, Li Ming might be frozen at any time. Walking slowly along the ice layer, the powerful consciousness spread out instantly. The range of consciousness spread was like a round sphere, with Li Ming as the center, and all places within the radius were covered by Li Ming. Down to the bottom of the ice layer, it extended for dozens of kilometers around, all within Li Ming's observation. Although consciousness can expand the range and increase the control area, it will become unstable if the range is too large. This instability is based on Li Ming's state of not moving. Once Li Ming moves quickly, the range of consciousness control will also change. After checking an area, Li Ming flew up and came to the edge of the observation area to continue to check and explore. It is not easy to explore such a large planet quickly and completely. Fortunately, Li Ming had nothing to do, so he slowly explored it in his spare time. After exploring more than a dozen places, Li Ming suddenly stopped. His eyebrows were tightened, his mouth was slightly open, and his face showed an incredible look. Under this ice layer is, whispering in his mouth, the scene at the bottom of the ice layer has appeared in Li Ming's mind. There is a huge open space deep in the ice layer, as if it has been hollowed out. The whole open space is like an underground palace. The bottom of the feet is rocky ground, and the top of the head is ice. The rocks are smooth and neat, like the ground where people live. And a mountain appeared around the open space. The black surface of the mountain constantly releases this cold air, which is very strange. The mountain looks normal from the surface, but inside the mountain is indeed a cage woven by ice blocks. The cage is formed by the accumulation of ice pillars, and there is an alien in the cage. The alien had black skin, and the armor on his body was very tattered. His limbs were tied with blue ice chains. Under the effect of the ice chains, his limbs had basically been assimilated with the pancakes, and could not move. Only his body could move back and forth. With his head slightly lowered, and his face full of frost, he didn't know how long he had been trapped. Li Ming had sensed this information through his consciousness. Is this a prison? Li Ming's eyes widened a little, and his face became slightly solemn. Prison planets are common. There were many planets in the solar system that were used as prisons. Just as Li Ming was thinking, this person suddenly raised his head, as if he suddenly woke up from a deep sleep, and looked up at the top of the cave. "Who are you?" His mouth did not move, but this sentence entered Li Ming's mind. This was a conversation of consciousness, which made Li Ming startled, and his expression changed slightly. If he could use consciousness to communicate, then the other party must also be spiritual civilization. Spiritual civilization is a rare type of civilization. Li Ming knew this before. Hearing the other party say this, Li Ming also became curious. He flipped his right hand, and a green light flashed in his palm. A green dragon flew out of his hand and disappeared directly into the ice layer. A few seconds later, a green light suddenly flashed in front of the blue ice cage, and a green shadow figure had emerged. It was Li Ming. When the person in the cage saw the shadow Li Ming, he was surprised and said, "It seems to be spiritual civilization. In this case, it's easy to deal with." The person continued to speak, with a faint smile on his lips, and then he opened his mouth and spit out a puff of black smoke. The black smoke slowly floated in front of the shadow Li Ming. The shadow flashed a faint light, and slowly raised his arm, aiming at the black smoke, and immediately obtained the information in the black smoke. This black smoke is some of the other party's consciousness, which contains some information related to the other party, because in spiritual civilization, conversation almost does not require words, but only relies on the communication of spiritual consciousness, which is unique to spiritual civilization. This black smoke is just like Li Ming's phantom, which is the consciousness that has left the body. When they collide with each other, their basic information will be quickly transmitted to each other. This person is called ANS, a 1.9 civilization from the Virgo cluster. As for why he was trapped here, the other party did not mention it. Li Ming still has some knowledge of the Virgo cluster. This huge group of galaxies contains more than 2,500 galaxies similar to the Milky Way, but they are tens of millions of light years away from the Milky Way. Such a huge galaxy cluster is so far away that it is not something that the technology of the first level civilization can do. The Virgo cluster not only has ordinary galaxies, but also has clouds with temperatures so high that they emit X-ray radiation. The dark matter contained in this galaxy cluster exceeds the visible matter. Li Ming's knowledge of it is limited, but these known information fills Li Ming's mind with question marks. Faced with these questions, the phantom Li Ming looked at the other party again. Li Ming also transmitted his basic information and questions to the other party, and smiled lightly and said, "If you are willing to save me, I will tell you everything you want to know." "Oh." Li Ming smiled lightly with a look of contempt. "I'm just curious. As for saving you, it depends on whether I'm interested in what you say. In Li Ming's trading rules, you must first see what you want, and then consider whether to save the other party. Letting Li Ming save the other party first is even more impossible." Seeing this, and smiled bitterly, and then hesitated, and then said, "It seems that I must compromise first." Li Ming also said coldly, "It's not as simple as compromise. If I'm not interested in what you say, then you can only stay here," and seemed to understand this truth. He stared at Li Ming with his eyes, snorted, and said, "Well, after all, this is also my chance to leave here." As he spoke, his expression gradually relaxed. Chapter 511, Space-Time Ship. Li Ming on the ice had a sad face and began to think, recalling the information he had just obtained, and allowed Li Ming's consciousness to enter his brain, and let Li Ming explore part of the information in his consciousness at will. This method was the most real and direct. After all, no one would come to this planet easily, and Li Ming was like a life-saving straw. And must seize this opportunity, but he couldn't be too anxious, otherwise he would fail. Because ANS was also a spiritual civilization, some of the information in his brain could not be viewed by Li Ming. If he wanted to forcefully view it, there would inevitably be a violent collision between consciousnesses. Li Ming still had to think about it before making a decision. But through the information he had just obtained, Li Ming did have a great interest. ANS came from the Boars galaxy in the Virgo galaxy cluster. The reason why he was imprisoned here was because ANS was discovered by the senior guards when he was stealing Liu Yan. During his escape, ANS stole the time-space shuttle and came here. The Virgo cluster is different from the local cluster. Entering the second level civilization here will be suppressed by the Shinmu organization, but there is no such suppression in the Virgo cluster, only one restriction. Simply put, there can only be a certain number of second level civilizations in the Virgo cluster. Once the number exceeds, it will be suppressed by advanced civilizations. Its basic form is somewhat similar to that of the local cluster. What Li Ming is interested in is the appearance of Liu Zuan in this consciousness. But Liu Zuan is in the Virgo cluster tens of millions of light years away. It is impossible to reach it quickly, which makes Li Ming hesitate. At this time, ANS looked at Li Ming and smiled slightly, saying, "Save me, we can return to the Virgo cluster together, and get Liu Zuan from there." This temptation is still very great, because Li Ming has also stayed in the local cluster for a long time, and has not found the whereabouts of Liu Zuan at all. Even if he gets information related to Liu Zuan, it is basically false. Looking at ANS in front of him, Li Ming shook his head gently and said, "This place is too far from the place you mentioned. When we get there, Liu Hong will be gone. And smiled and said, as long as you want to get Liu Hong, I still have a way. Oh. Li Ming immediately became interested. Seeing Li Ming's expression, Ans knew very well that Liu Hong's temptation was enough to make Li Ming stand with him, which would be of great help to him leaving here. After thinking for a while, Ans continued, as long as we find the time-space shuttle I drove when I came here, we can return to the Virgo galaxy cluster. Time-space shuttle? It was the first time that Li Ming heard of such advanced equipment, and he was also a little shocked. Ans nodded slightly and continued, this is a technological product that only a second-level civilization has. When I arrived here, I unfortunately encountered the second-level civilization of this galaxy group, the SYNOPSIS organization, so I was trapped here by them. As long as I can take the spaceship back from them. Li Ming's expression became solemn. When he heard this, his eyes sank slightly, and he was thinking in his mind, the existence of Liu Zuan can be confirmed. After all, it is information obtained from the other party's consciousness. According to the inheritance of the Virgo galaxy cluster, the number of second-level civilizations is inherited. Once one dies, Liu Zuan will be taken out, and a new person will be found to replace him. And this information comes from the depths of Ans's consciousness, so it is naturally true. However, to reach the Virgo galaxy cluster, a time-space shuttle is needed, and the spaceship happened to fall into the hands of the SYNOPSIS organization. This organization formed by members of the second-level civilization is the pinnacle of this galaxy group. It is almost impossible to get something from them. Thinking of this, Li Ming showed hesitation. Whether such a huge risk is worth trying, Li Ming still needs to think carefully. Looking at Li Ming's consideration, Ans's eyes turned and thought about something. After a moment, he said again, don't worry, since I kicked out the spaceship, I'm still sure to get the spaceship. My consciousness has been injected into this spaceship. As long as I give me some time, I can find its location. By then, everything will be under my control. Ans looked confident. Li Ming just looked at the other person casually. Li Ming knew very well that things would never be as simple as Ans said, but if he didn't try, Li Ming seemed to have no better choice. After all, Li Ming couldn't find any clues about the flow in this galaxy group. Even if the one in front of him was dangerous, it was still worth a try. Thinking of this, Li Ming's shadow on the ground suddenly disappeared with a hum. Ans paused when he saw this, but then, the ice outside the mountain suddenly made a squeaking sound. Hearing this sound, Ans smiled again. A crack appeared in the nearly 1,000 meter thick ice layer, and the whole earth shook, as if the whole planet had cracked. The crack was not big, only 2 meters wide, but for this planet, the movement was still huge. The shaking of the ice layer brought along the rocky land under the ice layer, and the mountain peak kept sliding down with gravel. After a few seconds, the shaking stopped, and Li Ming looked at the crack in front of him and flew down. Just like jumping into a cliff, the narrow gap is full of multiple interfaces of ice layers, like 2 uneven mirrors. With 2 pops, Li Ming passed through the gap and landed on the rocky ground. He locked his eyes on the black mountain and walked directly over. At this moment, another spaceship had approached the planet Perens. In the main cabin of the spaceship, Naze looked at the operating table in front of him. The glass ball-like planet was rotating, and Naze's face changed slightly. This guy actually came here where Ans was imprisoned? Naze's expression was slightly stern. His eyes moved slightly, and then he whispered, it seems that there is trouble coming. Before that, we should notify Lord Langai in advance. As he said this, he raised his hand and operated on the operating table. Inside the mountain at the bottom of the ice layer, Li Ming came to an independent cave, looked at Ans who was bound in front of him, and said, now, we can start our cooperation. As he said so, Li Ming slowly raised his right hand, and a white light flashed in his palm, and a beam of energy light shot out. His palm was like a flashlight, shooting the white light straight onto the ice. This ice prison is also extraordinary. It is not only the ice on the surface, but also has many barriers inside. When he suddenly touched it, Li Ming's eyebrows frowned slightly, but he smiled lightly immediately. This ability to add barriers to objects is an unexpected existence for Li Ming. For now, everything that Li Ming doesn't know may come from the second level civilization. However, after sensing the mystery of the object, Li Ming relaxed. It was easy for Li Ming to break the barrier, and the ice was naturally no problem. The originally powerful imprisonment device became vulnerable when it touched Li Ming. Suddenly, a white beam of light flashed in the palm of his hand. A green light entangled with the white light at the edge of his palm. The green and white lights intertwined for a while, and the power suddenly increased. There was a light bang. The ice prison shattered instantly, and even the ice chains on Anne's limb shattered and scattered. Without the restraints, Anne, with a frosty face, began to recover. The ice-like limbs gradually returned to their original state, and the frost on the surface of the body also faded away little by little. Seeing his body recovering little by little, Anne's mouth slowly opened, and a low laugh of he followed. Finally, I'm free again. Ha ha ha. The figure slowly stood up and looked at his body. The excitement was self-evident. Li Ming still had a contemptuous look on his face. After looking at the other party, he said, "What should we do next?" And still had a weird smile on his face. The dark mouth suddenly opened, and sharp teeth were exposed from it, followed by a long tongue protruding. The tongue was more than a foot long, and when it was extended, it looked like a strip of cloth. When the tongue was fully extended, a silver metal capsule wrapped by the tongue emerged. Ans grabbed the metal capsule and put the tongue back into his mouth. Chapter 512 Nays. With a slight squeeze of his right hand, the metal capsule emitted blue light and formed a disc-shaped light curtain, like a circular radar. After a few seconds, a light spot on the light curtain began to flash. That's the direction. Ans looked at the light spot on the light curtain and said. Li Ming also noticed the existence of the light spot. With his eyes narrowed, he saw something strange. This metal capsule was the controller of the spaceship, which could quickly sense the direction of the spaceship. Although there were no clear coordinates, it could be found by sensing the position and distance and driving in this direction. At this time, Ans clenched his right hand again. The blue light disappeared, and the light curtain disappeared with it, and he said, "Let's go." Wait. Li Ming stopped him immediately, smiled slightly, and said, "To show the sincerity of cooperation, I saved you, so this thing, shouldn't I keep it?" Ans was stunned when he heard this, looked at Li Ming, then looked at the capsule in his hand, and laughed strangely again, saying, "Okay, then you keep it." While speaking, Ans really handed the metal capsule in his hand to Li Ming. Li Ming was also slightly surprised, but he still reached out and took it without hesitation. After putting away the metal capsule, Li Ming turned around and said, "Let's go, my spaceship is outside." Walking out of the mountain, the gap in the ice layer above his head still existed, but before the two walked far, a figure in the ice layer had slowly landed. This person was wearing red armor, and sometimes flames were born from his body. The flames kept overflowing from his body like bubbles, but they only burned for a few seconds and disappeared. The person who came was Nays, a member of the SYNOPSIS organization. As soon as he saw Nays' appearance, Li Ming immediately stopped and looked cautious. The powerful second-level civilization aura had filled the entire space, and was relatively calm, staring at the sky with anger in his eyes, and whispered, "One of the members of the SYNOPSIS organization, Nays." Hearing the four words SYNOPSIS organization, Li Ming shrank slightly. Li Ming was very clear about the strength of the second-level civilization. If they really fought, although Li Ming would not be killed instantly like ordinary 1.9 level civilizations, the situation of the battle would definitely be dangerous and very unfavorable. Nays looked at the two people in front of him with contempt, snorted, and looked at Li Ming first, saying, "It seems that you are the guy who made whole Monshi disappear." His eyes turned slightly, and looked at Ans again. He continued, "Now rescue the guys from the Virgo Galaxy cluster. What's your plan?" Li Ming said nothing, but secretly prepared for the battle. Ans also secretly gathered enough energy and whispered, "It's interesting to face the challenge just after the cooperation begins." Nays looked at the two of them, shook his head slightly, slowly stretched out his arms, raised the corners of his mouth, and said, "No matter what your purpose and plan are, everything ends here." As he spoke, two balls of flame suddenly appeared on his palms. Before Li Ming could see the nature of the flame, Nays suddenly waved his hands and the flame flew out of his hands. "Don't touch the flame." Ans warned through consciousness and jumped to avoid it. Li Ming was also startled and didn't dare to take it head on, so he dodged. This flame looked no different from ordinary flames on the surface and was only the size of a fist, but under his wisdom, the structure of the flame was all energy body, not the kind of flame that releases high temperature, as if it had no temperature at all. Li Ming had no idea what the flame was capable of, but since Ans had issued a warning, he had to be extremely careful. The flame was extremely fast, but it still missed and was dodged by the two. Seeing the flame miss, Naze's face changed slightly, and he withdrew his hands and squeezed them hard. The two flames suddenly twisted and changed and turned into two firebirds. With a flap of their wings, they flew towards the two again. Li Ming frowned, shocked. He aimed his right hand at the ice layer above his head and grabbed it hard in the air. With a muffled bang, a large piece of ice broke off from the ice layer and then swung it at the flame below. The ice went straight to the flame. No matter what kind of flame it was, ice and fire must be incompatible. This was Li Ming's existing cognition, but the next moment, this cognition was refreshed. The firebird actually pierced through the ice and rushed straight towards Li Ming. It was too late to dodge at this time. The golden light flashed on the surface of the body, and the golden barrier had emerged. The firebird crashed into the golden light of the magic shield. Bang! The firebird scattered and turned into flames again and burned on the magic shield. The flames did not spread everywhere but continued to burn at the place where they hit. Li Ming did not notice anything unusual at first, but after a few seconds, he found something wrong. This flame is actually burning energy. Li Ming opened his mouth wide. His eyes widened a little. Just as Li Ming saw, this fire could actually burn a hole in the magic shield. The magic shield is formed by energy, and this flame can just burn up the energy. This flame is not formed by consciousness, but it can penetrate objects like consciousness, and can continuously burn away the energy of objects. At this time, looking at the still burning flame, Li Ming has understood it. However, after a few seconds, the flame gradually subsided and extinguished itself. The flame extinguished, Li Ming breathed a sigh of relief, and looked at Ans not far away, who was also safe and sound. Ans was not hit by the flames from beginning to end, but after dodging for a while, the flames also disappeared by themselves. Ans saw that Li Ming was safe and sound despite being attacked by the flames, so he was relieved. While looking at Li Ming, he also told Li Ming about the ability of this fire. This fire is called the fire of energy. Once hit, the energy in the body will be ignited like a piece of paper. If the energy is consumed by this fire, then it will be a dead end. Ans' voice entered Li Ming's mind. Li Ming stared at Naze in the air and replied, I understand. Although this fire is powerful, it cannot escape the law of energy. The formation of the flame comes from Naze's own energy. Simply put, Naze can transform his own energy into this flame by practicing special star books, but the flame does not exist forever. Once the converted energy is consumed, the flame will automatically extinguish. In addition to the flames thrown by Naze's hands, this flame is constantly burning on Naze's body surface. If he gets close to him, he will inevitably be unable to avoid the burning of the flame. In this case, we can only attack from a distance. Looking at Naze with his eyes, Li Ming has begun to think about how to deal with it. Naze's face was moved. He looked at Ans on the right and Li Ming on the left. He smiled and said, in that case, I'll start with you first. As he spoke, his cold eyes turned to Li Ming. The fire in his eyes flickered, and his killing intent was fully revealed. Li Ming turned his right hand, and an object similar to a lamp appeared in his hand. This object was not big, and it looked a bit like a lampstand. There was a faint fire burning on it. It was the nether lamp. The nether lamp was a 9th level floating dust weapon that Li Ming had taken from the nether warrior. Although this weapon was not as good as a divine weapon, it was also a top level existence in the 1st level civilization. Li Ming got 2 more weapons from the nether warrior. One was the nether blade and the other was the nether lamp. These 2 weapons had been refined by Li Ming's consciousness and belonged to Li Ming. They were taken out at this moment because of the special abilities of the 2 weapons. The nether lamp and the nether blade were both weapons that could attack energy, including phantoms formed by energy or element created by energy, but it was unknown whether they could deal with this flame, so Li Ming planned to take out the nether lamp to test it first. Seeing the weapon in Li Ming's hand, Naze just sneered, not taking it seriously at all, and rushed straight towards Li Ming. Li Ming was already close to the top of the ice layer at this moment. He wanted to see the other party get close. Li Ming suddenly raised his hand and tapped the top of his head lightly. Energy control. He whispered softly, and a blue halo spread out in a spherical manner. After the halo, the ice layer above his head suddenly made a squeaking sound, and then a large amount of ice fell off quickly, like hail falling down. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 513, Fire of Energy. This move was to stop Naze from getting close, but it was obviously a step too slow. With a flash of red light, Naze suddenly appeared in front of Li Ming. He looked at Li Ming with his eyes, his mouth corners raised, and raised his claws to grab Li Ming's head. That's it. Snap. Naze's palm slapped the top of Li Ming's head, and at the same time, he grabbed Li Ming's head with force, intending to burst it directly, but when he exerted force on his hand, his fingers penetrated directly into Li Ming's brain, as if Li Ming was not a physical entity. Naze was shocked. Before Naze could do anything else, Li Ming, who was caught by Naze, suddenly flashed with light. Bang! There was a muffled sound, and the light shone everywhere, and the energy wave flew in all directions. Just like a high energy bomb suddenly exploded. Under this closed ice layer, the airwave shock wave instantly filled the entire space. Sand and stones on the ground flew, and ice blocks fell above the head. The sound of air vibrations continued to ring in my ears. It took more than 10 seconds for everything to calm down. There were cracks above my head, as if the ice layer would collapse at any time. I could no longer see the ground under my feet, which was covered with scattered ice. Ants looked at the scene in front of him with a calm face. He looked around and whispered, "I can still sense Li Ming's breath, but where did this guy go?" After confirming that Li Ming was not dead, Ants relaxed in his heart. He looked around and looked for Li Ming's figure. His eyes finally stopped on the cracks in the ice above his head. Li Ming had entered the cracks in the ice and flew to the top of the ice, where, after confirming Li Ming's location, Ants also flew away. He came to the crack and went up vertically, but just as the two were flying, beams of red light shot out from the cracks in the ice below, like laser beams. The red light penetrated the entire ice layer in an instant. The 1,000-meter thick ice layer was pierced like tofu, and the entire ice shelf shook slightly. After Ants noticed this, she immediately yelled, "Not good." Li Ming, who was above her, also yelled, "Fuck." Before the two could do anything else, the whole area shook. Boom. A violent sound was heard, and the ice layer was completely broken. Huge ice blocks scattered with red light, just like the earth suddenly collapsed. The ice layer within a range of tens of kilometers collapsed, turning into broken ice blocks and falling down. For the entire Palan star, it may be just a small landslide accident, but for the people in this area, it is like the sky is falling, and the earth is collapsing, and the end of the world is coming. The ice blocks are of different sizes, but most of them are huge, like a pile of rocks. After a few seconds, a white light shot out from the ice block, and the white light rotated for a while, creating a channel, and then a white figure flew out first. But before the white figure flew far, two more figures followed below, Ants and Naze. The red beams from before turned into light bands that kept rotating around Naze, but the flames from before had disappeared. Ants gritted his teeth, turned around, and waved his hand. A black sickle was already in his hand. This sickle was extraordinary, and the black aura was breathtaking. Just a few glances at it made people feel terrified. Li Ming still had the dark lantern in his hand. Compared with the opponent's sickle, this sickle seemed insignificant. The huge difference between the weapons was immediately apparent. Seeing the right opportunity, Ants, who was originally going up, suddenly turned around and turned back to cut down with the sickle. Naze seemed to have sensed that the sickle was extraordinary, but with the powerful energy of his own second-level civilization, he still went forward head-on, and the red light bands floating around his body swept up. Bang! The red and black lights flashed, and the red light bands shattered and disappeared directly, but they were not as good as the sickle. Ans raised the corners of his mouth, his eyes flashed with cold light, and he continued to swing the sickle to attack. A mere first-class civilization, actually. After shouting in anger, Naze suddenly waved his right hand again, and a golden light circle suddenly appeared. The golden light circle was not an illusion, but a real entity, just like a golden collar. Bang! There was another violent collision, and this time the golden collar was not unusual, and it caught the attack of the hook sickle. Ans was shocked when he saw this, and thought to himself, it actually caught the attack of the vast universe magic weapon ghost. He was surprised and surprised. After all, the power of the vast universe magic weapon was not something that ordinary weapons could resist. The next moment, the red light band suddenly swept up, stretching towards Ans like a tentacle. The power of the red light band had been demonstrated just now, and the ice layer thousands of meters away was cut in an instant, not to mention an alien at this time, and seemed to have no means of escape. Looking at the approaching red light band, he could only open his mouth slightly, and his eyes wide open. He was about to be hit by the red light band. At this critical moment, Li Ming threw the dark lamp in his hand directly out. Pa! A crisp sound was heard, and a strange scene appeared. Those red light bands avoided Ans and hit the dark lantern directly. When this phenomenon appeared, Naze and Ans were both shocked. They were about to hit first. Why did they suddenly change direction? Ans even had the intention to die, but seeing the situation in front of him, he dared not stay any longer. He flew and quickly escaped from the gap between the red light bands. Seeing Ans escape, Naze showed anger. He looked at the dark lantern that had been cut into pieces by the red light bands, and then looked at Li Ming, who was higher up. Li Ming's expression had calmed down at this moment, and he looked down coldly. The explosion of the elemental clone did not hurt the other party. It should be that the red light bands played a protective role. He looked at it with his eyes and analyzed in his heart. The red light band was obviously extraordinary. Li Ming knew very well that facing a second level civilization, protecting Ans was protecting himself. Once one of them died, the other would be very passive. In the previous battle, Li Ming's attention was still attracted by the weapon in Ans's hand. Because the aura released by that weapon can only be found in divine weapons. Ans returned to the side of Li Ming again, and while cautiously looking at Naze, he whispered, "If it weren't for you just now, I would really be dead." Li Ming didn't care. After glancing at the weapon in his hand, he looked at Naze again and said, "For this, I lost a 9th level flowing dust weapon. More importantly, how can we deal with this person?" Both of them seemed extremely nervous, but Naze still looked calm. His figure slowly rose to a place parallel to Li Ming. He smiled lightly and said, "No wonder you are so confident that you dare to take my attack. It turns out that you are the holder of the vast magic weapon." The vast magic weapon. Li Ming was secretly surprised and looked at the weapon in Ans's hand again, and snorted, held the sickle tightly in his right hand, and gently raised the sickle to his chest, saying, "You haven't felt its true power yet. Next, I will show it to my heart's content." Hehe. Naze sneered and said, "The power of the vast universe magical weapon is beyond doubt, but how much can it be exerted in your hands?" In his words, Naze still revealed some fear of the vast universe magical weapon. Li Ming knew a little about the vast universe magical weapon. The vast universe magical weapon was a weapon of the same level as the vast universe artifact. It was a top weapon, but to use it skillfully, it required strong enough energy. Therefore, this kind of weapon requires a higher level of civilization to exert strong enough power. Ans held the sickle tightly in his right hand and said, "Even if it can only exert 1/10 of its power, it is enough to deal with you." The blade end of this dry ghost sickle is a sickle, only 2 feet long, and the handle end is only half a foot, as if there is only a handle. It looks strange, and the surface is full of black aura. As for its ability, it is even more unpredictable. Seeing this, Li Ming flipped his right hand and took out the dark blade. The two stood side by side with their weapons in hand, one in black and the other in white, fully prepared for the decisive battle. Naze's right hand slightly clenched the golden collar, his face slightly solemn, thinking to himself, "I was forced to use that trick by 2 1.9 level civilizations." Chapter 514, The Vast Universe Magical Weapon, Dry Ghost. Naze showed disdain at the corner of his mouth and looked at the other two with his eyes, saying, "Then I will use all my strength." As soon as the voice fell, the rotating red light bands around Naze's body suddenly shot out. This red band did not come to Li Ming and Ans, but flew to the distance around. This move made Li Ming pause, unable to see the clues. Ans's face also changed slightly, not knowing what the other party was up to. Naze held the golden collar tightly in his hand and raised his arms slightly. As his two arms were raised, the red bands flying to the distance suddenly rotated around the entire ice collapse area like two long snakes. After a few seconds, bang, a muffled sound, a huge red barrier completely enveloped the entire area, like a big red pot holding this area. The red light flashed, and there was nothing else except the red light curtain. This trick is perfect for dealing with you first level civilizations. After a burst of cold laughter, the heating light curtain bang burned with red flames, and the ice under the feet was also surrounded by red flames. At this moment, except for the air, the rest of the place was full of red flames. And saw this scene, and immediately understood it. He gritted his teeth and whispered, "This flame can burn the energy in our body, and at the same time, it is also consuming the energy in his body. The energy in the body of a second level civilization is higher than ours, so if this goes on, we will die sooner or later." Li Ming turned his eyes, first looked at the flame, then looked at Naze, and then said, "That means we must kill him in the shortest time." Li Ming's narrowed eyes flashed with cold light. Ans did not respond, but it seemed that this was the best way. His face was a little ugly. He held the sickle tightly in his hand and said, "Killing a second level civilization depends on our cooperation." Both of them knew that it was not easy to kill a second level civilization, but in the current situation, they could only fight to the death. And slowly held the sickle in his hand in front of him. A flash of light appeared, and the black sickle suddenly flashed, changing from black to dark red, and at the same time, the entity turned into a phantom. In order to ensure that the attack can hit, the battle ahead can only rely on you. And said. The solemn voice showed the importance of this attack. Li Ming looked at the sickle in his hand, and then looked at the other party, without saying a word. As a magic weapon of the universe, what kind of ability it has, Li Ming has no way of knowing. But there is one thing that Li Ming is still very clear about. At the current level of civilization, it is still impossible to exert the full power of this weapon. Holding the dark blade in his hand tightly, Li Ming's eyes narrowed slightly, and his eyeballs also turned into a cornered shape at this moment. Naze looked at the two indifferently, with a strange smile on his lips, and whispered, "Even if it is a magic weapon of the universe, it is impossible to exert any power in this space." Whispering in his mouth, looking at the two with his eyes, his right hand tightly grasped the golden collar, and his body moved, and flew out directly. Seeing Naze moving, Li Ming and Ans also flew out at the same time. He clenched the dark blade in his hand tightly, and his figure disappeared in a flash. Instant light slash. As soon as these three words came out, the dark blade in his hand had already slashed towards Naze's neck. This ability instantly shortened the attack distance, and was Li Ming's skill of killing with one strike. Bang! With a muffled sound, the dark blade collided with the red armor. Li Ming's eyes widened a little, and he said in surprise, "This armor actually." Li Ming would attack Naze's neck, and this position itself was not protected by armor. However, the moment the dark blade fell, the armor on Naze's back suddenly flashed to the neck, and took the blow. Naze also reacted very quickly. After sensing the movement behind him, his body suddenly turned around, and swung the golden collar directly at Li Ming. Li Ming had seen the power of the golden collar. It was an existence that could withstand the attack of the vast universe magic weapon. Naturally, he could not take this blow head on. The cloak behind him trembled, and Li Ming's body retreated and avoided the attack. Naze immediately looked at Li Ming head on, showing a strange smile, and said, "The speed of the attack just now was really beyond my expectation." Li Ming just looked at the other party coldly, but something strange had happened to him immediately. The previous attack did not succeed, and his body was stained with the red flame. His consciousness could clearly sense it, but the energy was disappearing little by little as the flame burned. "Let's see how long you can last in the city." He said this proudly, waving the golden collar in his hand, and heading straight for Li Ming. Li Ming frowned slightly, His face instantly became ugly, and he raised his right hand to activate the energy in his body, but he immediately let go and gave up. The flames around him limit the generation of the energy field. Energy comprehension allows Li Ming to control the energy around his body more freely, but his own energy has not yet formed a field, and was burned out by the flames. Obviously, except for close combat, other tricks are basically unusable. As he thought about this, Naze's figure was approaching, and the golden collar was smashing towards Li Ming's face. Bang! A muffled sound was heard, and 3 layers of golden magic shields were formed. The heavy golden light blocked the opponent's attack, but this golden magic shield also consumed a lot of energy in Li Ming's body. Snap! Before Li Ming could breathe a sigh of relief, the outermost layer of golden magic shield was shattered first, and the golden collar suddenly reached the second layer. This made Li Ming tense up. At this time, Ans in the distance tensed up, opened his mouth slightly, and whispered, "Good opportunity." While speaking, the hook in his hand was thrown out randomly, and the hook flew out of his hand like a long snake in the air. The trajectory of the lightning came behind Naze in just a blink of an eye. Naze was attacking Li Ming with all his strength, and suddenly noticed something strange. He quickly stopped attacking Li Ming, and turned to hide in the distance. Although Naze wanted to dodge, the roar seemed to have eyes, and it also made a sharp turn, and chased after him. The speed was so fast that it exceeded Naze's flying speed. Seeing that he could not dodge, Naze quickly waved the gold collar in his right hand to resist. With a buzz, the gold collar passed through the sickle hook, and it was impossible to resist, and roared into Naze's body. The sickle hook was in a phantom state, so the gold collar naturally could not resist. As the sickle hook entered his body, Naze's eyes suddenly widened a little, his head buzzed, and his body instantly stiffened, as if he was fixed. What's going on? My body can't move. Naze's expression was already stiff. The handle of the sickle hook was connected to a dark red chain, and the end of the chain was in Ans's hand. At this time, the chain was tightened, like a fishing line catching a big fish. Seeing this, Li Ming narrowed his eyes and looked around, and immediately found something unusual. The shadowy sickle hid not Naze's body, but Naze's soul. Life has no soul. The soul here is just the energy in the body. The energy in the body is distributed throughout the body, making the shape of the energy the same as the body, so it is called the soul. As the chain tightened, the sickle began to pull outward, as if to pull Naze's soul out of the body. But Ans was not at ease either. His solemn expression showed the pain caused by operating the sickle. Li Ming could see all this through his wisdom eyes. The ability to manipulate the vast universe magic weapon requires extremely high energy in the body. Of course, there is another more important point. That is, the ability of the weapon corresponds to the foundation of the civilization. This ability of the vast universe magic weapon is obviously unique to spiritual civilization. Ans is originally a spiritual civilization, so it is easier to operate than other civilizations, but for this level, it is obviously still very strenuous. While pulling hard, Ans turned her gaze to Li Ming and said, "Next, it's up to you." Li Ming immediately understood the meaning of this sentence. His eyes changed, and he looked at Naze fiercely. Chapter 515. I have killed a level 2 civilization. Under the effect of the sickle hook, Naze could only resist stubbornly to prevent his soul from being hooked out of his body, but in this way, he could not perform other operations. This was naturally the best opportunity for Li Ming. He looked at Naze with his eyes, without the slightest hesitation, and flew up with his grip on the dark blade. With a flash of white wings, Li Ming's figure had already arrived above Naze's head. He held the dark blade tightly in his right hand, aimed at the top of his head, and stabbed it directly. Naze's face was extremely ugly at this time, and he clenched his teeth tightly. Seeing Li Ming approaching, he had no way to stop him. Snap! With a light sound, the dark blade in Li Ming's hand pierced into Naze's brain. When this attack hit, Li Ming's eyes widened a little. From the perspective of the top of his head, there were actually 2 souls in Naze's body. This strange scene startled Li Ming, but before Li Ming could do anything else, a strange scene appeared. The moment the dark blade pierced in, the originally tense sickle suddenly pierced through Naze's body, and then made a sharp turn, and headed straight for Li Ming. Li Ming was shocked, and quickly let go of the hand holding the dark blade, and jumped to avoid it, but it was too late. The sickle flashed and hooked Li Ming's body. The sickle was still in a phantom state. The chain pierced through Naze's soul and body, and the sickle had already hit Li Ming. Li Ming's face suddenly changed, and his eyes immediately turned to Anne's. Hehe. A cold laugh came out of Anne's mouth. Looking at Li Ming, who was hit, he whispered, "It doesn't seem so hasty to choose this time to act." Li Ming still said nothing under his solemn expression. He looked at Naze beside him, and then looked at Anne's. Anne flew towards this side and slowly approached, and continued, "I originally planned to take action after finding the space-time spaceship, but I changed my mind temporarily. Things like Liu Yuan cannot be easily shared with others." Li Ming's body suddenly shone with green light, as if his body was burning with green flames. He looked at Anne's with his eyes and said, "It's really too early for you to take action now." Huh. Anne suddenly paused. Li Ming's eyes then looked at Naza and continued, "If Naza died like this, the flames in the sky and on the ground should have disappeared. But, as you and I can see, these flames are still there." Naza's face suddenly darkened when he heard this, and his eyes turned and looked at Naza. Naze still did not move. His body was dead, and he did not find anything abnormal. But after watching for a few seconds, Anne immediately understood something. He gritted his teeth and whispered, "This guy actually has two energy bodies." As he said this, Anne suddenly moved his arm, and the chain swung with it. The sickle hooked on Li Ming pierced Li Ming's soul, and turned and ran towards Naze again. But after the sickle pierced Li Ming's body, before it could fly out, a green arm suddenly grabbed the handle of the sickle, making it unable to move. Anne's face changed, and he looked at Li Ming. He saw a green shadow Li Ming appeared behind Li Ming, and one hand was still holding the handle of the sickle. What's going on? Anne was stunned on the spot. Li Ming was still calm. As for the green shadow Li Ming, it was the ability of Li Ming's wisdom eye, the flying dragon, but now it appeared in the form of a shadow Li Ming. In the eyes of ordinary spiritual civilization, this is incredible, because the soul leaving the body will be a deadly act. Ans opened his mouth slightly, staring at Li Ming closely, and the muscles on his face twitched slightly. Li Ming continued, "As the owner of spiritual civilization, I suddenly feel that this weapon seems to be more suitable for me." While speaking, the other hand of the phantom Li Ming suddenly grasped the chain, and then the blue beam began to rotate around the chain. Ans turned his eyes and looked at Li Ming, saying fiercely, "So what? How can you fight me now?" Li Ming's expression did not move. He looked at Naze beside him and began to think. Although Naze was dead, another soul in his body was still active. This soul supported the flame barrier and continued to consume this space, which indirectly affected Li Ming. Li Ming was unable to fight at close range now. The phantom Li Ming only temporarily suppressed the sickle. After all, the sickle was full of An's consciousness. This was a necessary behavior for refining the magic weapon, just like Li Ming's Niteng. The phantom Li Ming used his consciousness to make the raw temporarily not affect the energy in Li Ming's body. His eyeballs turned slightly, and the blue flame on Li Ming's body suddenly flashed. A blue hand suddenly stretched out and wrapped Naze's body, then pulled it back with force, and saw a soul was directly caught by the blue hand. Bang! The big hand squeezed hard, and the soul exploded directly, turning into starlight and disappeared. As soon as this soul disappeared, the flame barrier dissipated, and the entire area immediately returned to normal. And Naze's body also collapsed and fell to the ground. The body fell, but there was still a soul left in place, but because of the restraint of the chain, it could not move at all. Naze has two souls, which means that there are two energy bodies in his body. After the body was killed by Li Ming, one of the two soul bodies was controlled by the dry ghost chain, and the other was directly pulled out by Li Ming. This also means that Naze is completely dead. Seeing the red flame disappear, Li Ming's body completely relaxed. He turned his eyes and looked at Ans, saying, "Now, there are only you and me left." Ans was startled when he heard this. The voice was frightening. Looking at Li Ming at this time was more frightening than seeing Naze before. Despite this, Ans had no way back. He pulled hard with his hand, and the chain suddenly tightened with a bang. However, the other end of the chain was in the hand of the phantom Li Ming, so even if it was tightened, it would not affect Li Ming's real body. Li Ming also snorted coldly, and the wings behind him suddenly flashed, and a group of mist was released. This mist rolled back and forth in the air like a dark cloud, and it submerged Li Ming in it in just a moment. The grey mist rolled quickly like a dark cloud and rushed towards Ans. Ans frowned and his eyes widened a little when he saw this. A few seconds later, the fog enveloped the area, and Ans was also in it. His eyes turned around and he whispered, "This fog is." As soon as he said these words, his body suddenly tightened, and the fog around his body suddenly formed a big hand that held Ans tightly. "Ans, you should have some understanding of my strength. By the way, I have killed a second level civilization alone." Li Ming's voice quickly entered the other party's ears. This made Ans' face immediately gloomy. Before Ans could do anything else, a black palm suddenly stretched out. The palm was completely black, like ink. It was hard to see what kind of ability it was, but just looking at it made people feel uncomfortable. Ans bit his teeth tightly, and the black light on his body suddenly became stronger. With a muffled bang, the foggy hand was freed. Ans moved and was about to fly away from here, but before he flew far, the shadow chain in his hand suddenly tightened and pulled him back. Li Ming and the shadow Li Ming suddenly appeared from the mist, and the shadow Li Ming even tightened the chain with his hands. Ans looked at the tightened chain, and then at the black hand. Suddenly, he opened his mouth and the long tongue came out of his mouth, flying towards Li Ming's real body like a rope. But before he could stretch out far, the black hand suddenly grabbed his tongue tightly. The long tongue broke free from the black hand, as if the black hand was made of mud, and could not withstand a single blow. Li Ming was calm, watching the tongue stretching towards him but not moving. When the tongue came to Li Ming's face, it suddenly paused and stopped. Ans realized that something was wrong at this time, and his eyes were wide open. The black hand, that was just broken free by the tongue, turned into liquid, and entered his body along the tongue. Chapter 516, Goddamn Star. The mist is Li Ming's pet beast, a turbid creature from another world, and the black hand is the insect race that Li Ming has tamed, the microworm. In the Shanhaingayanshan, these species grow rapidly and have all belonged to Li Ming, just like a part of Li Ming's body, which can be manipulated at any time. The microworm entered Ans' body and immediately began to play its powerful role. Ans couldn't say a word at this time, and his eyes were wide open with fear and despair. The hand that was originally holding the dry ghost sickle loosened, and his hands fumbled around his body, as if he wanted to take something out of his body, but the microworm was too small, and ordinary eyesight would not be able to see it, if it was not a group action. Looking at the struggling ants, Li Ming's expression was indifferent, and he whispered, "I really wanted to cooperate with you, but I didn't expect you to want to harm me." After saying this, the mist suddenly became thicker, and Ans' figure disappeared in the mist. At this time, Li Ming looked at the sickle in front of him, raised his right hand gently, and then the shadow sickle shrank for a while, and finally turned into a black stone, and fell into his palm. Li Ming stared at the black stone with his eyes, revealing a slight smile. He clenched his palm, and put away the dry ghost. At the same time, he shook his cloak, and all the black micro-worms and smoke began to return to it. When all the smoke disappeared, everything was finally calm, and the shadow Li Ming also entered Li Ming's body. He looked around, and looked up at the sky. Two spaceships were motionless in the air. One was the one Li Ming drove when he came here, and the other was the one Naze drove at this time. Li Ming's eyes moved slightly, and finally locked onto the one driven by Naze. After a slight smile, he flew away. At this moment, in a spaceship in the distant starry sky, two aliens in the main cabin were frowning and looking at the operating table. These two people were Lang Yi and Gao Yi. Lang Yi stroked his white beard and frowned, saying, "The situation is a bit complicated now." Gao Yi looked serious and said, "When we arrived at Palans, Naze sent us a message. How come he has disappeared now?" Lang Yi did not reply immediately, and began to think deeply. That guy named Li Ming has been in our sight for a long time. Hal Monchi also provided us with a lot of information about him. After Hal Monchi disappeared, Naze also disappeared. Lang Yi said so, looking at the light spot that kept moving on the operating table, and continued, "Could it be that Hal Monchi and Naze were both killed by this guy?" As soon as this guess came out, Gao Yi was immediately startled. His face suddenly became ugly, his eyes slightly widened, and he said, Death would be the best explanation for the unexplained disappearance, and both of them disappeared after contacting Li Ming. But they also faced another problem, that is, how could a 1.9 level civilization kill a second level civilization? This is against common sense. Lang Yi continued to look at the moving light spot on the console and whispered, "Our equipment has a time limit to lock on an individual. This guy's signal has begun to become unstable. If he gets away before the signal disappears, this guy will become the existence most likely to advance to the second level civilization in this galaxy group. We haven't solved this guy, Haozin, yet, and another guy like him has appeared." Lang Yi frowned in worry. Gao Yi was also thinking deeply. After a moment, he said, "Then notify Lord Peogu." Lang Yi waved his hand gently and said, "Lord Peogu has important things to do. We'd better not cause him any more trouble. As for this guy." As he said this, Lang Yi's eyes were already fixed on the console. Just as he was about to continue speaking, he suddenly frowned, took a deep breath, and his face showed a strange color. Gao Yi, who was also looking at the operating table, was also surprised and said, "Where is this guy going?" This question seemed to wake Lang Yi up instantly, and he quickly said, "Not good." Gao Yi had not figured out the reason yet, and looked at Lang Yi with some confusion. Lang Yi said immediately, "This guy may be going to Godam." Gao Yi immediately turned his gaze back to the operation after hearing this, and then took another look at Li Ming's position and direction, and immediately showed surprise, and said, "This guy is indeed heading to Godam, but what is he going there for?" Lang Yi glanced at the other party and said fiercely, "Li Ming came from Palans, where Ans is imprisoned. This person must have obtained the information about the space-time spacecraft from Ans. Otherwise, how could he go to Godam?" Gao Yi suddenly realized it after hearing this, but after a little thought, he said, "Lord Lang Yi, don't panic. Even if this person is going to Godam, isn't Lost Evans still there?" Lang Yi also snorted coldly and said sternly, "Gao Yi, don't forget, if Hal Monshi and Naza both died at the hands of this person, would Evans be spared? Let's go. You and I will go to Godam immediately." Having said that, Lang Yi left quickly. At this moment, Li Ming was driving Naza's spaceship to Godam Star. Naza's spaceship had a clear distribution map of the planets, and with the capsule of the space-time spaceship, Li Ming locked onto the planet at once. Godam Star is not far from parent star. Both belong to different star systems, but the distance will be faster if teleported. In the spaceship, Li Ming has checked the specific information of Godam Star. Godam Star is not a habitable planet. The entire surface of the planet is heavy metal rock, like a piece of iron flying in the universe. The appearance is roughly round, but the surface is full of undulating hills. There are no plants on the entire planet, and the temperature is low all year round. The surface of the planet is relatively smooth. Because of its mass, the surface of the planet is like a man-made road surface. This kind of metal structure planet is not uncommon, and there are often some metal mines needed by advanced civilizations on this kind of planet. But according to the information obtained by Li Ming, the real purpose of Godam Star is border defense. This is a border station of the Shenmue organization in the local galaxy group. Its purpose is to prevent the invasion of alien species and the escape of internal wanted persons. Ans was captured and imprisoned on the planet Palans after arriving here. The person guarding the planet Gotham is the middle level of the Shenmue organization, Wang Lion Evans. Although he is also a second level civilization, his status is higher than that of Halmonshi and Naze, and his strength is naturally extraordinary. However, Li Ming has no way out at this moment. If he continues to stay in the local galaxy group, he will continue to face the pursuit of the Shenmue organization. Only by getting the space-time spaceship and going to the Virgo galaxy cluster can he avoid the pursuit. At the same time, Li Ming has a chance to get Liu. After a teleportation, the bare planet Godam has appeared on the operating table. Compared with the planet Palans, one is a black iron ball and the other is a blue ice ball. Both are uninhabitable planets. Li Ming raised his hand and pointed at the operating table, confirming the teleportation location. The location of the spaceship is already very accurate. With the metal capsule, the coordinates of the spaceship can be quickly determined. This is mainly based on the sensing distance between the two. The closer the distance, the more accurate the location can be sensed by the metal capsule. Entering the space of Gotham Star, the spaceship that Li Ming was riding made a light hum sound, and the spaceship disappeared on the spot. When the spaceship appeared again, it was already above a plane on Gotham Star. The ground in this area is flat, with occasional small landslides. After carefully checking it from the operating table, Li Ming frowned slightly and whispered, "The sensing location is here. Why can't I find the spaceship?" The entire area was empty, and there was no trace of the spaceship at all. This puzzled Li Ming for a while, but when he looked at the metal capsule in his hand again, the location of the group sensing in the blue light was exactly here. His eyes turned slightly, and Li Ming seemed to have thought of something. He turned around and walked out. A blue light flashed at the bottom of the spaceship, and a beam of light shot out from it, and Li Ming's figure slowly fell from the beam of light. At this time, his eyes narrowed slightly, and his wisdom ability had been activated. Chapter 517 Calm Evans. With his wisdom, Li Ming indeed found something unusual. This area was covered by a circular barrier, which was an induction barrier, and also had a hidden effect. This barrier with two abilities might only be possessed by a level 2 civilization. With his wisdom, this barrier was like nothing, and Li Ming could clearly see the objects inside. An H-shaped spaceship parked on the ground, 100 meters long and more than 40 meters wide, with a silver exterior, looked much stronger than an ordinary spaceship, and there were two black buildings next to the spaceship. The buildings were not big, one tall and one short, like two castles. Li Ming looked at these, and his eyes were still locked on the spaceship, because this spaceship was the purpose of Li Ming's visit. When he came to the barrier, Li Ming's right hand slowly stretched out, white light flashed in his palm, and circles of ripples spread out, and a hole appeared on the barrier. Li Ming smiled slightly, and stepped into it. After successfully passing through the barrier, Li Ming smiled, and turned to walk towards the direction of the spaceship. However, he stopped in his tracks after just a few steps. His face changed slightly, and he looked up. In the sky, a triangular metal object was flying in the air. This object was a triangle, like a pyramid, and was only the size of a football. There was an eye on each side. At this moment, the eye on one side was staring at Li Ming. Li Ming looked up at the object intently, but when he looked into the eyes, he was immediately startled, and a trace of fear rose from the bottom of his heart. "It seems that you are the guy that Lord Lang Yi said." A rough voice suddenly came, and as soon as the voice fell, a figure slowly descended from the air. This person was wearing light yellow armor, with a grey-white cloak behind him, holding a trident in his hand, like a harpoon, but the surface was shining with golden light, which looked extraordinary. Li Ming looked up at the other person, his expression tensed, and whispered, "Dead Evans." Just as Li Ming said, the person who came was Evans. Evans' eyes turned slightly, looking at the spaceship in the distance, and then looked at Li Ming, saying, "You have no chance to board this spaceship." As he spoke, he moved and actually ran directly towards Li Ming. Li Ming's expression tensed up, and he was ready to fight the moment he saw the other party. A white light flashed in his hand, and the lightsaber was already in his hand. Seeing the oncoming trident blade, he swung the sword to block it. Bang! A muffled sound was heard, and Li Ming's figure retreated several steps. The powerful energy collision directly shook Li Ming several meters away. His eyebrows wrinkled slightly, and his right hand holding the lightsaber flashed blue light, and the lightsaber in his hand slowly turned blue. The subtle change of the lightsaber attracted Evan's attention. He stared at the blue lightsaber in Li Ming's hand with his eyes fixed, and whispered, "The energy has undergone a qualitative change. It is indeed not an ordinary 1.9 level civilization. It is still a guy that cannot be underestimated." As he said this, his body moved again, and flew towards Li Ming. Li Ming swung his sword, and the blade cut through the sky. A blue sword wave broke through the air. Facing the sword wave released by Li Ming, Evans cut down the trident in his hand. Bang! A muffled sound was heard, and the blue sword wave was cut off instantly, but it did not disperse. On the contrary, the broken blue light wave flashed slightly and instantly turned into two hurricanes that swept over. This sudden change startled Evans. Before he could react, the two hurricanes completely wrapped Evans. After the rotating hurricanes wrapped around him, Evans' entire body was frozen and turned into an ice sculpture. Li Ming looked at this scene, still with a solemn expression. Hui Kong, wisdom, civilization, and the combination of energy, potential and limit. How far is it? As he muttered to himself, a squeak sound suddenly came out, and the ice cracked a little bit. Li Ming's brows tightened when he saw this. After a few seconds, bang! The ice broke, and Evans reappeared. Very good energy control and change, but this level of attack is still too weak, he said with an angry look on his face. His eyes widened a little, and he swung the trident blade straight down. Li Ming was shocked, and quickly retreated to avoid it. Boom. A loud noise was heard, and the trident blade actually made a big hole in the ground. The ground was considered to be hard metal, extremely hard, but it was obviously too fragile under the attack of the trident blade. It was like two metals collided together, flashing sparks, and at the same time, rock fragments flew everywhere, as if the ground was blown up by a bomb. The broken stone and green smoke dispersed, and Evans did not stop at all. After missing the first attack, he immediately exerted his feet to fly towards Li Ming again. Li Ming naturally expected it. He swung his right hand again, and another blue light wave flew out. After the previous experience, Evans still had a new view of the blue light wave. Before the light wave approached, the triangle in the air suddenly flashed and blocked in front of him. At this time, the light wave flashed and turned into a ball of fierce flames that rushed forward, but the triangle shook with a buzzing sound, forming a huge triangular shadow barrier. As soon as the flame approached, it shrank instantly and was completely absorbed by the shadow. Fuck, Li Ming exclaimed inwardly. That thing can actually absorb attacks? His eyes widened a little, and he looked at the triangle carefully. Without stopping, he swung the blue lightsaber at Evans again. This time, no light waves flew out. Instead, the lightsaber in his hand turned into blue silk threads and entered the ground around him. After a few seconds, the ground suddenly squirmed. It was as if the ground was softened. Evans naturally noticed all these changes. He watched intently and whispered, "This guy's energy can change at will, and he can also inject it into objects for molecular manipulation. It is indeed not an ordinary intelligent civilization." As he said this, a big hand suddenly rushed out from the ground, and the huge palm was about to grab Evans. Evans' eyes flashed fiercely, and the trident suddenly swung. Bang! The huge palm was shattered, but at the same time, more than a dozen big hands appeared around Evans' body. Evans' eyes turned left and right, and he glanced at those big hands. His right hand suddenly clenched the trident tightly. Void annihilation. A loud shout came from Evans' mouth, and the trident suddenly glowed with golden light. Then he swung his right hand vigorously. Bang! A huge arc was drawn from the edge of the trident. In just a moment, all the giant hands were cut off. This swing seemed to be understated, but the energy and attack effect contained in it were really amazing. Li Ming looked at it and opened his eyes wide, thinking to himself, this attack strength, worthy of being a second-level civilization. It would be bad if I was it. At this time, Evans slightly shook his head, looked at Li Ming on the ground, and raised the corner of his mouth slightly, saying, "What other means do you have? Hurry up and use them." Li Ming narrowed his eyes slightly, and his solemn face showed that he was thinking about something. All elemental attacks are ineffective, so now I can only use the Nirvana vine. As he spoke, Li Ming slowly raised his right hand, and a green bud appeared in his palm, which was a green bud picked from the Nirvana vine. Although the green bud was small, under the flashing green light, a strange energy aura had spread. Evans naturally noticed all of this, and the green bud in particular attracted Evans' attention. Li Ming suddenly clenched his right hand, and suddenly the green light became stronger. With a muffled hum, a green shadow vine flew out of Li Ming's hand. Evans' face changed when he saw the green vine, and a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. "Are you finally using your real skills?" As he spoke, his left hand slowly raised and grabbed the triangle in the air. The triangle suddenly flashed and spun quickly like a gyroscope and came to Evans' palm. The triangle shone brightly in Evans' palm, then merged into his palm and disappeared. In the center of his palm, a triangle pattern appeared, and an eye blinked in his palm. Li Ming gritted his teeth, stood up and leaped up. The shadow vines in his hand tumbled and spread out like tentacles. Evans was not afraid at all. He smiled sinisterly and said, "Come on. Let me see your true strength." Chapter 518 Elemental Summoning. The trident in Evan's right hand flashed with golden light, and the eye in the palm of his left hand occasionally released red light. Facing the attacks of the phantom vines, he could actually resolve them one by one. The battles between advanced civilizations will be more extreme, the use of energy and abilities will be more targeted, and both offense and defense will become more important. In the sky, the green phantom vines kept whipping each other like whips, and facing the attack of the artifact, Evans responded calmly. The trident in his right hand kept releasing golden light, blocking all the attacking green phantoms, and the one-eyed eye in the palm of his left hand kept releasing red beams. I don't know what kind of ability this red beam has, but it can directly penetrate the vines and crack the attacks of the phantom vines. It is much more powerful than the trident. The two of them collided and attacked from a distance in the air, and they were evenly matched, and it was difficult to tell who was better. This situation is obviously very unfavorable for Li Ming, but he is helpless. Evans in front of him is different from Holmonshi and Nays before. Evans is more calm, because he is a second level civilization, which is higher than Li Ming. He is not arrogant, but steadily advances, dissolving Li Ming's attacks one by one, and gradually finding Li Ming's advantages and disadvantages. Li Ming also gradually feels a bit of difficulty. Once this second level civilization uses a calm tactic, it is indeed beyond Li Ming's reach. At this time, the netting used is already Li Ming's strongest attack, but even so, it can't do anything to the opponent. Then, Li Ming will fall into a passive state. After a wave of continuous attacks by the phantom vines, it can't do anything to the opponent. At this time, Evans laughed coldly and said, "What? Is this all you can do? Is this all you have?" While resisting the attack of the phantom vines, Evans made a disdainful sound. At this time, Li Ming was already struggling. Looking at his opponent, his face gradually became ugly. If this continued, Li Ming would not only fail to get the spaceship, but also might die here. After weighing it in his mind, he quickly thought of a countermeasure. Before he could come up with a better way, a golden bird suddenly rushed down from the sky. Swoosh. As if a god descended from heaven, the golden bird swooped down and headed straight for Li Ming. As soon as he noticed it, Li Ming looked up. At the first glance, it was still 1,000 meters away from him, but in the blink of an eye, it was already in front of him. Li Ming's eyes immediately widened a little, and at the same time, he also saw the true face of the big bird. The so-called golden bat turned out to be an arrow. The big bird was just a phantom appearance, with powerful energy attached, and its core was the arrow. Because the speed was too fast, Li Ming had no time to react. When he saw it clearly, the arrow had already reached his chest. It was too late to dodge, and the golden magic shield quickly condensed, but it was still a step too late. The golden magic shield that had not yet condensed was directly broken and scattered halfway through the condensation, and then the long arrow went straight into Li Ming's chest on the right side. Boom. With a loud bang, Li Ming chased the ground with the force of this arrow, and then the earth cracked, the rubble collapsed, and the cracks continued to spread until several kilometers away. Then, the crust between the cracks burst up and flew into the air, as if a huge energy was rushing out from the ground. From a distance, it seemed as if a golden bird had just dived, bit Li Ming, and hit the ground. In a blink of an eye, a large pit of 7 or 8 kilometers had appeared on the ground. Dust filled with heavy metals filled the entire air, and then quickly fell and dissipated. Seeing this, Evans looked up, and saw 2 people slowly flying in the sky, and they were Lang Yi and Gao Yi. The one who shot the arrow was Gao Yi. He put the longbow back on his back, looked at the deep pit with his eyes, and whispered, "This time, it should be solved directly." As they spoke, the 2 figures had already arrived above the pit. Evans saw that it was these 2 people, smiled slightly, and said, "You 2 came at the right time, otherwise I would have to spend some time to deal with this guy." After nodding slightly, Lang Yi said, "This person is quite powerful, and he killed 2 members of our Cheyenne organization. He must be killed immediately, otherwise, there will be endless troubles." As he was talking, there was a clattering sound suddenly from the depths of the pit, and the broken rocks slid down little by little, which made the 3 people immediately look at the bottom of the pit. In the rubble, a figure was seen half squatting and struggling out of the rubble. It was Li Ming. However, at this time, Li Ming's face was covered with blood, and there was a blood hole on the right side of his chest. The blood soon soaked his whole body. He breathed deeply, and the wound flashed green light. The ghost key had already started to heal automatically. He's not dead yet? Gao Yi showed a look of surprise, and looked at the bottom of the pit intently. Seeing this, Evans snorted coldly and said, "Then let me deal with him." As soon as he finished speaking, Evans was ready to move forward, but as soon as he turned his body, before he went down, something abnormal happened in the deep pit. Li Ming's body suddenly flashed with black light, and a strange energy aura spread out. At this time, Li Ming's right hand was already holding a ball of dark energy, and he whispered, "You can only use the original energy, too." Before he finished speaking, a ball of blood spurted out of his mouth. Lang Yi waved his hand and said, "Do it." As soon as he finished speaking, Evans immediately flew down. Li Ming gritted his teeth tightly, and the dark energy in his right hand suddenly slapped the ground in front of him. He opened his bloody mouth and whispered, "Elemental summoning." As soon as the voice fell, the black energy spread out with a hum, and a huge character was formed on the ground. No one had seen such a strange character, but as soon as the character was formed, it slowly flew up into the air. Then the surface of the character flashed with black light, forming a sphere, which was like an egg. After a few seconds, the black shell gradually faded, and a silver-white human figure emerged from it. This person's whole body was silver, and the surface of the body was constantly jumping with arcs. The whole person was somewhat translucent, and there was only a vague outline on the face, and the real facial features could not be seen clearly. And this is a elemental life from another world. Summoning elemental life requires the consumption of original energy. Original energy is like a person's lifespan. Every summoning will consume it. Li Ming used this trick once, but after knowing that it requires the consumption of original energy, Li Ming rarely used it afterwards. At this moment, his life was in danger, and Li Ming had no choice but to use this trick to save his life at the cost of original energy. As soon as the silver electric man appeared, he looked at his hands and body. There were only 2 sunken eye sockets at his eyes, without eye sockets or eyeballs. The whole body was jumping with arcs, and energy was radiating. He turned his head and finally looked at Li Ming. Because Li Ming lost his original energy when he summoned him, the body of the electric man also contained the original energy that Li Ming lost. This was also the benchmark for determining how long the summoned person could exist. After looking at Li Ming, his eyes immediately turned and looked at the 3 people in the air. At this time, Evans, who had just dived halfway, stopped immediately and looked at the electric man in front of him with a look of horror. Lang Yi and Gao Yi, who were farther away, also looked at each other and showed puzzlement. But the electric man clenched his fists tightly, and a sound of arc flashing was heard. The electric man disappeared directly on the spot. The next moment, the electric man suddenly appeared in front of Evans. The right fist hit hard. Bang! The rapid attack made it impossible for people to react. The fierce fist hit Evans' head at once. In a flash, Evans' body whooshed and shot out. Boom! Evans shot into the ground like a bullet, and rocks flew around. Evans' figure instantly disappeared in the rocks. After the attack, the lightning man disappeared again. The next moment, lightning flashed in front of Gao Yi and Lang Yi. Before they could see their appearance clearly, 2 fists had already hit. The left and right fists hit Lang Yi and Gao Yi's abdomen respectively. The 2 people's eyes suddenly widened, blood gushed out of their mouths, and then their bodies shot out. Before the flying body landed, the lightning man flashed again, and came to the top of the 2 people. At the same time, his right fist clenched and flashed violently. Chapter 519 Goodbye. Crack. Or thunderbolt struck down from the sky, and the speed of the thunderbolt was exactly the same as the speed of the lightning man's fist. It was as if the fist and the thunderbolt hit Lang Yi at the same time. Boom. The strong thunderbolt filled the field of vision, and Lang Yi's figure could not be seen at all. When the explosion sounded, the ground was already covered with dust and rocks. Gao Yi looked at Lang Yi's fate. Cold sweat dripped down his forehead. His mouth slightly opened, and his trembling eyes were full of disbelief. The next moment, the lightning man had appeared in front of him. One leg kicked sideways, crack. A lightning bolt and the lightning man's leg hit Gao Yi's head together. This kick was a sideways kick, and the lightning bolt was also sideways, in the shape of a 1, as if there was a lightning bolt passing parallel in the air. The dazzling white light flashed, making it impossible to look directly, and when you look clearly, Gao Yi's figure has disappeared without a trace. Clean and neat, the speed was extremely fast, as if every attack was a flash of light, and the attack force was extremely powerful. In just a few seconds, the 3-second level civilizations had all fallen. At this time, Li Ming slowly stood up, his face pale and his whole body exhausted, but after seeing the fate of the 3 opponents, Li Ming had forgotten his pain. His body slowly flew up, and his eyes looked around. At this time, Evans had slowly climbed up from the ground, but he was already covered with scars. He raised his head slightly, and saw that Lang Yi and Gao Yi had disappeared. Only Li Ming was not far away in the air. Seeing Li Ming again, Evans clenched his teeth tightly, his eyes were full of ferocity. Li Ming looked back at the other party weakly, slowly raised his right hand, lightly tapped it, and then turned, and flew to other places. There was nothing unusual about this casual action, as if he was pointing at the other party, and Evans didn't understand what it meant, but at this moment, a sizzling sound suddenly rang in his ears. It was as if there was an arc jumping above his head. As soon as this sound entered his ears, Evans' expression changed drastically. The muscles on his face trembled slightly, and his head lifted up little by little like a gear. When his eyes could see the top of his head, the figure he least wanted to see appeared. It was the Electric Man. Crack. Boom. The deafening sound resounded through the earth. Li Ming, who had already flown far away, paused slightly and looked back. He saw that the place where Evans was already full of dust and smoke, and the big pit had expanded several times. Li Ming turned around and continued to fly far away. He stopped only when he was above the big pit, where Lang Yi was. He looked down with a pair of wise eyes. Lang Yi was already lying in the rubble and couldn't move. Seeing this, Li Ming continued to fly far away. Coming to the side of the spaceship, Li Ming took out the metal capsule and gently pointed it at the spaceship. A blue light shone from the side of the spaceship, and the blue light completely enveloped Li Ming. In just a flash, Li Ming disappeared on the spot. When Li Ming appeared, he was already in the main cabin of the spaceship. He looked around and saw a transparent sphere floating in the middle of the main cabin, like a water drop. Li Ming waved his right hand and a green light flashed into it. As soon as the green light entered, the entire spaceship made a beep sound, and the lights of various equipment lit up, and it had already started. Philong controlled the spaceship, while Li Ming closed his eyes and sat aside without moving. The green light on his body flashed, and he began to recover and treat his wounds. The information about the spaceship had entered Li Ming's mind. This spaceship was indeed a time and space spaceship, but the energy in the spaceship had been exhausted. The only energy left could only maintain the flight and operation of the spaceship, and it could not even teleport, let alone travel through time and space. After learning this information, Li Ming took a deep breath. The energy consumption of the spaceship was huge, not as simple as that of ordinary aliens, but Li Ming did not care too much, because Li Ming had a lot of energy on his body. The spaceship started slowly, flew into the air little by little, and disappeared in the air after a moment. Although it is impossible to teleport, it is not wrong to fly away from Gotham Star first. As for the energy supply of the spacecraft, Li Ming can take out a drop of cyan water. This drop of cyan water is enough for the spacecraft to travel through time and space many times. In the spacecraft, Li Ming closed his eyes to rest and recuperate, and the energy in the spacecraft has been replenished. At this time, Li Ming does not need to do anything at all, and it is enough to let Philong handle everything. Fly away from the galaxy where Gotham Star is located, and the next step is to enter the space-time shuttle. I saw the light years flashing in front of the entire spacecraft. The arc jumped, and a red space-time crack had appeared. The space-time crack was generated by the spacecraft system. As long as there is enough energy, the spacecraft system can also generate space-time cracks. It's just that the space-time cracks here can only travel in the same universe. The crack has been generated, just like opening a portal. The electric light in the red crack keeps jumping, and the spacecraft begins to enter it little by little. At this time, Li Ming slowly opened his eyes, looked at the operating table, and then slowly closed his eyes again. Goodbye, this galaxy group. Swoosh. The spaceship disappeared on the spot like a ray of light, and the moment the spaceship entered the crack, The entire airspace immediately returned to calm, the crack also closed and disappeared, and the universe returned to its original state. Everything seemed to have never happened. At this time, in a space of space tens of millions of light years away, thousands of spaceships were attacking each other. A galaxy war was going on. The spaceships of both sides continuously fired light energy weapons, and beams of light beams with arcs shuttled back and forth between the spaceships. At this time, the energy shield of the spaceship was extremely important, because it was the only barrier to resist the attack. At the same time, this was also a huge war between technological civilizations. The performance and weapons of the spaceship were the key to success or failure at this time. Thousands of spaceships were like thousands of small boats drifting in the universe, shooting at each other. I saw light beams shuttle back and forth, and sometimes there were spaceships directly destroyed. Just when these spaceships were fighting fiercely, there was a flash of lightning in the middle of the airspace, and an arc-shaped crack was torn open little by little. This crack was like a person's eyes, closed at first, and then slowly opened. It was a crack in time and space. The entire crack was red, and the process of its formation was more like a hole being torn open in this airspace. Then a spaceship slowly sailed out. The appearance of such a strange astronomical phenomenon caused the fighting spaceships to suddenly stop attacking. The location where this spaceship appeared was in the middle of a battlefield, and the spaceships that were attacking each other could immediately sense the powerful energy in the crack. When they saw another spaceship flying out, they turned their attention to it in astonishment. The originally fierce battle also came to an abrupt end in an instant. When this spaceship appeared completely, the space-time crack slowly closed. In the main cabin of the spaceship, Li Ming frowned slightly as he looked at the operating console. Li Ming was not sure where this was, but his face sank slightly after seeing so many spaceships. He did not know why, but the operating console did not show the current location and safety coordinates, which made Li Ming slightly startled. Isn't this the Virgo galaxy cluster? Li Ming was a little surprised. At this time, the spaceship was still flying a little bit, and the spaceships of those unknown forces were still around. However, while Li Ming's spaceship was flying, these spaceships had not launched any attacks. The scene was like a group of people fighting each other, and then a figure suddenly appeared, and these people stopped fighting, and this person slowly walked through the fighting crowd. Everything was quiet at this time. After a while, Li Ming's spaceship left this airspace little by little, but as soon as the spaceship left, the war here started immediately. Li Ming looked at the operating table and didn't care, because from the information on the operating table, the battles between these spaceships were all low-level civilizations, and the comprehensive capabilities of the spaceships were completely different from the spaceship driven by Li Ming. This is why these spaceships dare not attack casually. Not far from the battlefield of these spaceships, there is a green planet. The entire planet is covered with green vegetation, as if it is a planet made of plants. As for which large or small galaxy this belongs to, Li Ming doesn't know, but since he has seen this planet, he might as well go up to understand the situation. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 520 Booster. Under the control of Filong, the spaceship approached the green planet little by little. After entering the space of the planet, Li Ming did not enter the planet immediately. He just let the spaceship fly slowly in the orbit of space. Because this is a strange place, Li Ming is not sure what kind of civilization exists. Therefore, it is better to be safe. After flying in space for a while, Li Ming found a trace of abnormality through the monitoring function of the spaceship. There are no civilized creatures on this planet. Li Ming, who was sitting cross-legged, frowned slightly, opened his eyes slowly, and said to himself, there are no civilized creatures on this planet. But, what is going on with the war over there? Thinking of this, Li Ming raised his hand and pointed at the operating table. After confirming the transmission direction, the spaceship disappeared at the spot with a buzz, and just after the spaceship driven by Li Ming disappeared, in the oval spaceship in the battlefield, there were two aliens in the main cabin looking at the operating table. At this time, the operating table did not show the current battlefield, but showed the planet that Li Ming had just approached, disappeared. This spaceship entered Cebu Star, one of the aliens with horns on his head said in surprise. Another long-necked alien also fell into deep thought and said, the space-time rift just now was obviously transmitted from a faraway place. Could it be that this spaceship came all the way here just to head for Cebu planet? The collection on Cebu planet has not yet ended. We can't let this guy who suddenly appeared mess up the situation. Cassie, you go and report this matter first. I will be responsible for the current battle situation. The long-necked alien said this after some thought. Cassie saluted and replied, yes, Commander Anelli. At this moment, Li Ming's spaceship has stopped above a dense forest. The vegetation here is lush, surrounded by mountains, and sometimes there are streams flowing in the mountains. It is a completely beautiful natural scene. Looking at this beautiful scenery, Li Ming's mood suddenly improved a lot, but looking at his chest again, the wound has not recovered yet. After some thought, Li Ming turned around and walked out. A blue beam of light shot out from the bottom of the spaceship, and Li Ming then landed from the beam of light. Now Li Ming needed to recuperate, so he checked the surrounding environment when he landed. With a light glance, he finally locked onto a towering tree. This tree was extraordinary, as high as 300 or 400 meters, and the trunk was extremely thick. What Li Ming saw was a natural tree hole on the trunk. On the branch at the top of the trunk, there was a naturally formed groove, like a tree hole, and the location was relatively hidden, and it was also very close to his spaceship, which was a good place. After determining the location, Li Ming moved his body and flew over quickly. He came to the tree hole and looked up and down. The whole tree hole was like a small room opened on the trunk. Although it was not big, it looked pretty good. Li Ming came to an open space and sat cross-legged on the ground. Then he shook his cloak and saw colorful lights flashing everywhere, and all 5 pet beasts had appeared. After not seeing them for a long time, these 5 pet beasts had undergone tremendous changes. Li Ming was shocked with just a rough glance, and his eyes widened slightly. It's been a while since we last met, and you're all in the 3rd zone, Li Ming said in surprise. These beasts absorb energy in Shang and grow quickly, so it's naturally much easier for them to advance than Li Ming. The transformation of wild beasts into demon beasts is the result of long-term absorption of mutated energy. It's naturally easier for these beasts to advance than civilized creatures. The easier here refers to being in a specific environment. Simply put, beasts can advance a little bit as long as they have enough energy supply, but in the vast universe, civilized creatures have severely squeezed the distribution of energy. Most planets with energy are controlled by civilized creatures, and the energy that beasts can obtain is limited, so it's not so easy to advance. And what's what in Li Ming's Shang is the last place for beasts to survive, so it's easier to advance. Looking at the 5 pet beasts in front of him, Li Ming took a deep breath and said, you have grown up very fast during this period. I'm injured now, and need to recuperate for a while. During this period, except for Ziling, you can move freely. As soon as the voice fell, Walker suddenly took 2 steps and said, let me stay. Li Ming looked at Walker, then his eyes turned and looked at Moore. At this time, Moore was combing his feathers and making strange sounds. Li Ming immediately said, Ziling is enough. After speaking, Li Ming slowly closed his eyes. Although he closed his eyes, Li Ming could clearly sense the changes in the 5 pet beasts. In addition to the improvement of the level of the magic horn golden fungus beast, it also underwent a huge mutation. Li Ming could understand the changes in its body energy and consciousness through consciousness, but Li Ming did not know whether its ability had changed. Then there is the turbid beast. It is no exaggeration to say that the turbid beast is definitely the combat power of the 5 beasts of Li Ming. The turbid beast comes from another world, and its bloodline is higher than that of the beasts in the current universe, just like the carbon-based life and silicon-based life in civilized creatures, which are essentially different. Then there are the fox beast and Walker. As a star beast, Walker is a unique existence. It is also a combat type, so its strength growth is naturally extraordinary. The fox beast is a mutant beast cultivated by Li Ming. It belongs to the elemental beast and has grown a lot at this moment. As for Moore and the magic horn golden fungus beast, they are both auxiliary beasts. Their growth is naturally of great help to Li Ming. The growth and strengthening of these beasts are good things in themselves, but Li Ming still has some concerns about the turbid walker. The turbid originates from another world. It is unknown what changes will happen if it grows too fast. After all, it is not a creature in the current universe. Li Ming needs to be careful at all times. Walker is more special because Li Ming has found many animal phantoms in Walker's body before. Although he does not know the reason, he should pay more attention. These worries are entirely due to some gaps in Li Ming's cognition. Because he doesn't know, he is worried. However, Li Ming doesn't need to take it too seriously at the moment. He will understand it naturally when he achieves a higher level of civilization in the future. His mind gradually calmed down, and Li Ming began to concentrate on healing his wounds. On this planet without civilized creatures, it is enough to have Zilong guarding, so Li Ming is still relatively relieved. At this moment, in the oval spacecraft on the battlefield of the spacecraft, Anneli was concentrating on the operating table. The operating table at this time was showing the current battle situation. Anneli was concentrating on the battle situation with a solemn expression. At this time, Cassie suddenly stepped forward and said, "Captain Anneli, the general has replied." Huh? What did the general say? Anneli immediately looked serious. Cassie continued, "The general means that now is a stage of war between our Timmons Galaxy and Timothy Galaxy. It is not easy to make many enemies. Try to avoid this person. If this person is also here for the Heavenly Flower on Cabe, then first find out the details of the other party and then make plans." Anneli paused after hearing this and fell into deep thought. After a moment, Anneli nodded slightly and said, "Cabe's full of poisonous gas. Every landing consumes too much energy. Then do as the general wants. Inform Boucher. If you encounter this person, try not to have a conflict. If there is any news, notify us immediately." "Yes, sir." Cassie responded again and turned away. At this time on Cabe, in the jungle, Moore was flying with the fox beast, sometimes rising into the sky, sometimes diving down, having a lot of fun. "Woo!" he shouted with an excited expression on his face, and even the fox beast on his back let out a low roar of excitement. "Well, the air is full of the breath of freedom." Moore said this, closing his eyes and feeling the breath. After Moore dived again, there was a sudden snap sound, and his whole body stiffened, like a ball of mud hitting the wall. But in front of Moore was a blank, without anything. Chapter 521, Heavenly Flower. Ah! With a loud shout, the two beasts suddenly fell from the sky. At this time, Walker, who was far away, was standing on the top of a big tree, staring at the direction of Moore, frowning slightly, and whispered, "What's going on?" From Walker's perspective, there was a vacuum in front of Moore, without any objects, but Moore's body seemed to have hit the wall. Walker raised his head slightly, his face slightly surprised, and saw a flower appearing in the sky. The flower was red, like blood, but the position of the flower was shown in the air, as if a flower grew out of thin air. Could it be? Walker seemed to have thought of something, and his body suddenly moved, and flew over quickly. At this time, Moore's falling body suddenly turned over, his wings flashed, and he flew up again, and took over the falling fox beast with one fly. The figure stopped in the air, and he looked at the front with concentration. Suddenly, the body surface flashed red, like a radiation circle that enveloped the surrounding area. It was Moore's spiritual power. Moore practiced Jiuo Hukang, so his spiritual power was naturally extraordinary. After the red light, a big tree suddenly appeared in the empty place in front of him. So it's a big tree that can be invisible? Moore saw the object in front of him clearly, and slowly raised his head. He saw that there was a bunch of flowers on the top branch of the big tree. The flowers were deep red and bright, and looked extremely weird, but the flowers continuously released circles of energy waves. Wow, so beautiful. Moore was stunned for a moment, then looked at the feathers on his body, smiled, and said, "The feathers used to decorate me must be great." As he said this, he flapped his wings quickly, and flew straight up. In the eyes of ordinary people, it might be a flower that suddenly appeared in the sky, but Moore can clearly sense the appearance of the whole tree through his wisdom eye ability, and the location of the flower is exactly on the branch of the tree. Looking at the flower, Moore showed an impulsive smile, his mouth slightly opened, and his fangs were exposed. It's so beautiful, Mer said to himself, and then he flew to the branch, stretched out his wings, and plucked the flower with a snap. Holding the bright red flower, Moore smiled. The flower is bright red, like blood, with a smooth and slightly shiny surface, as if it can reflect light, a bit like crystal, but the trembling petals are a bit soft. After observing it for a while, Moore inserted the flower on his head, but felt that it was not appropriate, so he inserted it on his chest. After changing the position several times, Moore began to look around. At this time, a small pond in the forest attracted Moore's attention. He moved his body and flapped his wings to fly over. Just as Moore flew away from the branch, liquid began to flow out of the broken red flower. The liquid was yellow-brown and kept pouring out from the broken branch. The place where the liquid flowed was immediately revealed, and the previous invisibility effect disappeared. It was as if a bucket of dyed liquid was changing the tree's clothes from the top of the tree. What was even more strange was that these liquids seemed to have some special ability, flowing and seeping into the surface of the tree. As the liquid seeped in, the tree's skin began to appear quickly. All these scenes appeared in Walker's eyes. He looked up and stared at it, his expression slightly solemn, and whispered. The whole tree began to emit energy. It's the tree beast. In the thick hair on Walker's back, a long golden object twisted and came to the top of Walker's head, looking at the distance and saying. Hearing this, Walker glanced at the direction of his back and then looked back at the tree that was gradually recovering its appearance. The long golden object on Walker's back was the mutated magic horn golden fungus beast. After the advancement and evolution, the magic horn golden fungus beast has undergone a huge change. Its body is like a golden earthworm, without eyes and facial features, but it has the same vision as Walker, which is one of the abilities of the golden fungus beast. Once it attaches itself to someone, it will acquire the other person's sensory abilities. From the surface, this big tree should be the heavenly branch. The magic horn golden fungus beast continued. Walker frowned in surprise and said, Heavenly branch? The magic horn golden fungus beast said, the heavenly branch is gentle from growth to flowering, and has the ability to be invisible, but this is all an illusion, because the energy of the heavenly branch is concentrated in its body. The heavenly branch flower on the branch is the key factor in whether the heavenly branch can be resurrected. The heavenly branch flower will attract the attention of civilized creatures. Once the heavenly branch flower is picked, the energy liquid in the heavenly branch will flow out, and then it will be resurrected. The magic horn golden fungus beast continued. Walker also looked over cautiously, but was not too worried. He just whispered, as long as it doesn't threaten the master. That's not necessarily true. The magic horn golden fungus beast continued. Once the heavenly branch is resurrected, its previous gentle side will completely disappear, replaced by irritability and violence. Similarly, it will try its best to take back the lost heavenly branch flower, because the heavenly branch flower gathers a lot of energy generated by its growth. Redevouring the heavenly branch flower will make the heavenly branch even stronger. After saying this, Walker's expression became more serious. At the same time, Walker and the magic horn golden fungus beast's attention was completely focused on the location of the big tree. At this moment, Moore's figure slowly landed on the edge of a pond, looking down at the water in the pond, as if looking in a mirror, while holding the bright red flower and comparing it to his head and chest. Where should I wear it? He muttered to himself, and kept looking for a suitable position on his body. But at this moment, the giant tree's branches suddenly moved slightly, and the whole tree had completely lost its invisible state. The entire body surface was yellow-brown, and the trunk looked even harder. The tree had no eyes or ears, but there were many vines wrapped around its branches. With a slight shake, it seemed as if the whole tree would move. Every time the tree moved, the ground shook slightly, as if there was an earthquake. At this time, Walker tightly grasped the trunk and looked up at the tree. It seems that it has been resurrected. The voice of the magic horn golden fungus beast followed. Walker's expression was relatively calm, and he looked up at the tree's actions without any slack. The giant tree's activities became more and more intense, and the shaking of the ground became more and more compact, as if the ground in this area was about to be lifted up. Under such a vibration, the water surface in front of Moore began to ripple and could no longer be used as a mirror. At this time, Moore turned his head angrily and saw that the big tree not far behind him was shaking like a giant. Moore's eyes widened a bit, and he asked curiously, "What is this?" The fox beast also looked at the giant tree quietly, motionless, but the next moment, a branch of the giant tree suddenly bent and slapped directly towards Moore like a big palm. Moore was shocked when he saw this, and he flapped his wings and hurriedly flew away. The branches of the giant tree were extremely huge. This slap covered the sky and the sun, covering the entire area. Although Moore tried his best to fly away, the branch fell before he flew far. Snap! A light sound was heard, and the strong and hard branch hit the ground. Moore was also slapped to the ground by the branches in the middle of the branch. Before Moore could do anything, the vines on the branches suddenly moved, like snakes coming towards the two little beasts. Moore just struggled to get up, and two vines suddenly rolled up and completely entangled Moore. The fox beast on the side was also entangled before he could react. At this time, the fox beast struggled, but couldn't break free. Suddenly, its face turned red, and it gnashed its teeth. The red tail behind it suddenly grew longer and longer. The tail flashed and blazed like a flaming whip. Snap! The tail swung in front of it, and the entire thick tree trunk was immediately melted by the high temperature. The trunk broke, and the vines on it automatically loosened. The fox beast and Moore regained their freedom. Moore looked at the tree beast with anger. Just as he was about to do something, he suddenly glanced at the fox beast beside him and said, "Fuck it." Chapter 522, Capturing Moore. The fox beast's expression suddenly tensed up, and it flew out with all its limbs, jumping onto the broken tree trunk. At this time, its red tail suddenly flashed red again. The red hair on the tail spread quickly, dyeing the yellow-brown hair on the fox beast's body red, and the fox beast also turned completely red. After the red light, there was a high temperature flame, just like a beast of the flame element, running quickly along the tree trunk, leaving a fire on the tree trunk after each footprint. The fire burned quickly, just like a fire mark appeared where the fox beast ran. Following the branches of the tree trunk to the main trunk of the big tree, the fox beast suddenly opened its mouth and blurted out an aurora. Bang! The aurora directly penetrated the trunk of the giant tree. After a muffled sound, a hole appeared in the trunk of the giant tree, and flames continued to burn from it. The tree seemed to feel pain, shaking and tottering. This scene was seen by Walker in the distance, who whispered, "It seems that I don't need to do anything." The magic horned golden fungus beast also whispered, "That fox beast guy. Huh. What about Moore?" The magic horned golden fungus beast suddenly asked. At this time, Moore watched the fox beast win a great victory and jumped around excitedly. However, Moore didn't know that an alien had been lurking nearby for a long time. The alien's eyes were always fixed on the red flower on Moore's body. Under his sinister face, his mouth whispered slightly, "Heavenly branch flower." The whisper was not loud, but Moore's keen hearing had already noticed something. He suddenly turned his head and looked behind him. He saw that the surface of the pond was calm and there was nothing unusual. Moore's eyes turned left and right, and he said to himself, "I clearly heard some movement just now. Why is there no sound suddenly?" After a careful inspection, he found that there was nothing, so he turned his head back, but at the same time as his head turned back, a tall figure was already standing in front of Moore. This person was an alien, wearing purple-red armor, and holding a big knife on his back. He looked at Moore coldly. Moore was startled when he suddenly saw this person and screamed, "Ah!" The sharp cry resounded through the sky, and the fox beast in the distance could hear it clearly. It turned its head and looked in the direction of Moore, only to see a purple-red figure flash and disappear in that area. The fox beast suddenly opened its eyes wide because Moore was gone. Walker, who was farther away, seemed to have heard Moore's voice. His originally relaxed body suddenly tensed up and stood up, looking in the direction of the sound. Moore's voice, Walker said solemnly, and after a little thought, he did not hesitate. He jumped and went straight to the location of the sound. After a few flashes, Walker's figure came to the vicinity of the pond just now, but Moore had disappeared without a trace. Not only Moore, but also the fox beast had disappeared. Unable to find Moore and the fox beast, Walker panicked. At this time, the magic horned golden fungus beast also stood up alertly, pointed in a direction, and said, "This way." As he spoke, His golden body pointed in a direction like a soft rope. The magic horned golden fungus beast determined the direction and flew away quickly. While running fast to track, Walker did not forget to turn his eyes back and asked, "How do you know the direction?" The magic horned golden fungus beast replied, "I have left my golden fungus on everyone. Within a certain distance, I can sense its position, but if it exceeds this distance..." Walker's brows tightened when he heard this, and his feet accelerated. "If it exceeds my sensing distance, you will lose the target." This sentence seemed to remind Walker that once he was thrown away by the opponent for a certain distance, it would not be so easy to find the opponent again. Walker bit his teeth tightly, and his grey body suddenly flashed with light. More powerful energy was released from the surface of his body, and his movement speed became faster. Walker's speed was undoubtedly high. His agile and flexible body allowed him to display his amazing speed, which was definitely higher than that of the civilized creatures in the third zone. However, Walker still could not see the backs of Moore and the fox beast. All directions still depended on the magic horn golden fungus beast to guide him. This made Walker, who continued to run, look heavy-hearted. He thought to himself, "With my speed, I can completely suppress the civilized creatures in the third zone. Now I can't catch up with them. So, is the other party a special beast or a second level civilization? It shouldn't be. If it is a special beast, it can't kill the fox beast in seconds. It can only be a second level civilization." Thinking of this, Walker frowned. If it is a second level civilization, Walker analyzed it in his mind, and his face gradually became ugly. But his speed did not decrease at all. After quickly shuttling through the jungle and tracking for half a day, Walker suddenly stopped. He saw a spaceship parked in the sky not far away, and an alien was entering the spaceship little by little along the light column under the spaceship. Walker frowned and looked at the alien entering little by little. His face suddenly became ugly. It's too late. Walker looked extremely ugly. The purple-red alien entered the spaceship little by little and disappeared in a flash of blue light. But at the moment, when the blue light disappeared, a yellow-gray figure suddenly flew out from the jungle below. This figure shot directly into the spaceship from the jungle like a bullet and disappeared in an instant. Seeing the last figure that appeared, Walker's eyes widened and said, "Fox beast." Just as Walker saw, the guy who rushed out of the jungle was the fox beast. After Moore was captured, the fox beast had been following him. Just when the alien entered the spaceship, the fox beast also followed him. However, not long after the fox beast entered, the spaceship made a buzzing sound and disappeared in the air with a bang. It was teleported away. Watching this scene, Walker's body standing on the branch remained motionless. "What should I do now?" said the magic horned golden fungus beast. Walker turned his head slightly and said, "This can only be told to the master." As he spoke, his body moved and flew away. At this moment, in the outer space of Cebu, a light flashed, and a spaceship had emerged. It was the spaceship that had just disappeared on Cebu. In the main cabin of the spaceship, the purple-red alien grabbed Moore with one hand and looked coldly at the fox beast opposite. At this time, the fox beast's 7 tails were slowly floating behind it, like 7 snakes, and the fox beast was grinning at the other party. The two were facing each other like this, but Moore flapped his wings for a while, and then bared his teeth and claws, and shouted with a pleading face, "Fox beast, save me, save me." When the fox beast saw Moore's expression, his eyes suddenly turned sideways, and his 7 tails flashed, and the light was bright, and powerful energy was released from the tail. At this time, the purple-red armored alien's face also changed, and under a fierce look, he hurriedly said, "This is space. If the spaceship is destroyed, then we will all die." This sentence made the fox beast react immediately. He looked at the operating table with his eyes and saw that the current location was indeed outer space, and the spaceship was still preparing to continue transmitting. "Go back," the fox beast replied fiercely. The alien on the opposite side, seeing that the fox beast had no intention of taking action, immediately felt relieved, and after a chuckle, he said, "It is impossible to go back. Once the spacecraft starts, it will go directly to the destination, otherwise it will not stop." As he spoke, a light flashed on the operating table, and the spacecraft did carry out a teleportation. Moore gradually calmed down at this time, looking at the fox beast with a worried face, completely at a loss. Seeing that the situation gradually stabilized, the alien smiled slightly and gradually relaxed. But the fox beast on the opposite side looked at Moore, hesitated for a moment, and said, "Don't worry, Moore, you will be fine." Moore was held tightly by the other party and could not move at all. Hearing the fox beast's words, he just took it as a comforting word and didn't care at all. But when the alien looked at the fox beast, his face was cautious. A faint light flashed on the console, and a voice message came in. "Bouchet, did you get it?" The purple armored alien, without moving his eyes, replied directly. It went more smoothly than expected, but it also brought some trouble. "The battle over your side should be over." "Yeah, very good." There was no movement after the voice reply again. Chapter 523 Virgo Galaxy Cluster. On the planet Cabe, Li Ming sat in a tree hole with his eyes closed and in concentration. Opposite Li Ming, Walker stood in concentration without moving, and the magic horn golden fungus beast also curled up on Walker's back. Naturally, he told Li Ming about Moore and the fox beast. Li Ming looked calm and motionless, as if he didn't hear anything. Only the turbid mist surrounded Li Ming. After a moment, Li Ming's eyes slowly opened, looked at Walker in front of him, took a deep breath. His face looked a little ugly, and then slowly closed his eyes and said, "Since there are aliens on this planet, then you look around and bring other aliens to me immediately after you find them." Walker immediately understood what he was hearing, turned around, and jumped away. Li Ming also continued to close his eyes and concentrate, without saying a word. Li Ming's injuries have not yet fully recovered. In this unfamiliar Virgo galaxy cluster, Li Ming still has too many unknowns, and judging from the operating console of the space-time spacecraft, this is not the Boreas galaxy. According to the information Li Ming got from his home planet is located in a star system in the Boreas galaxy, and Liu is in that large galaxy. If he arrived at the Boreas galaxy, the spacecraft should have detailed records, such as the name of the planet, the astronomical map, and the safety coordinates. But there is no record of the place where Li Ming arrived, which is enough to show that the place where Li Ming's spacecraft arrived is definitely not the Boreas galaxy, or even the Virgo galaxy cluster. Li Ming cannot judge whether there is a more advanced civilization in such a strange place, or whether there is any unknown danger, so it is extremely important to restore his own strength to its heyday. Now what Li Ming has to do is to find some aliens, to get the information he wants through the wisdom eye, so he can only shoot Walker to find out. Walker is naturally calmer and very clear about Li Ming's ideas, but it is hard to say whether he can find aliens. The agile figure shuttled through the jungle, and the magic horn golden fungus beast also continuously released its own golden fungus, which will control the life that can be controlled to help find it. This green planet is not small, and it is not easy to find a person. Walker jumped and said to himself, it may take some time to find it this way. The soft body of the magic horn golden fungus beast stood up from Walker's furry back. After sensing the surroundings, he said, "If you want to find it quickly, let me use this trick." As soon as the voice fell, the magic horn suddenly straightened its body, and then the energy on the surface of the body began to overflow rapidly, and the golden energy beams continued to gather at the top of the magic horn. A golden sphere has formed on the top of the magic horn. The sphere is not big, and the whole golden light is flashing. Although it is made of phantom, it gives people a sense of entity, as if it is a sphere made of gold. Seeing this, Walker's body, which was originally running fast, suddenly stopped slowly. At this time, the golden fungus beast suddenly pushed its body upwards, and the golden ball immediately flew into the air, leaving the jungle and flying straight into the air. A few seconds later, a muffled sound of bang was heard. The golden ball exploded instantly, turning into a golden wave that rippled around. The spreading golden ripples covered the entire planet little by little like a layer of gauze. The golden bacteria were not the bacteria we knew, but a weak object formed by energy, similar to Li Ming's consciousness attack, but the difference was that the golden bacteria would erode the target's body tissue. In simple terms, wherever there were microorganisms, there would be infection with the golden bacteria. The magic horn golden fungus beast was no longer what it used to be. It grew and mutated rapidly under the nourishment of Heng Yunsheng. Although it did not have a strong frontal attack capability, it was still very powerful in auxiliary attacks. The golden energy spread rapidly, and some unknown creatures began to appear one by one. The sky branch, tree beast, wild beast, and various creatures appeared little by little in the golden bacteria. The spreading area of the golden bacteria was huge, and various creatures were controlled by the golden fungus beast, but one area suddenly attracted the attention of the golden fungus beast. On another sky branch tree, an alien was slowly flying close to the top of the sky branch. Found it. The golden fungus beast suddenly said, turning its body slightly, pointing in a direction, and said, "This way." Walker heard this, and moved his body, shooting out like a grey light. Under the guidance of the magic horned golden fungus beast, Walker moved forward quickly, like a grey lightning passing through the jungle. After a moment, Walker's figure suddenly stopped. Looking up and staring ahead, he saw an alien looking back and forth in the air. Although Walker could not see anything unusual, the golden fungus beast sensed clearly that the alien was looking for something around an invisible celestial branch. This celestial branch tree beast was obviously too young. The celestial branch flower on the top had not yet bloomed. It was just a bud. The alien looked around, as if he was still looking for something else. Walker snorted and whispered, "It's just a 1.7 level civilization." As soon as the voice fell, his figure flew out. After a flash, Walker suddenly appeared in front of the alien. The sudden appearance of Walker startled the other party, and his eyes suddenly widened a little. "Come with me." Walker's cold voice came out immediately. The alien clenched his teeth tightly in his mouth, waved his arm, and a blue ripple flew out of his hand. Bang! The blue wave hit the celestial branch, making a violent vibration, but Walker's figure had disappeared. The alien's eyes turned around, but he did not find Walker's whereabouts. At this time, 3 cold claw blades were gently placed on the alien's neck. Walker had quietly come behind him and whispered, "If you dare to move again, I will cut off your head." While Walker was speaking, a tentacle suddenly extended from the body of the golden fungus beast, and after a bend, it wrapped around the opponent's neck. Under this wrapping, the alien's body suddenly shook, as if it was fixed by some force, and its eyes widened slightly, and then the eyeballs turned golden, which was controlled by the golden fungus group. Seeing this, Walker attracted the claw blade and said, "Let's go." As soon as the voice fell, the alien flew up and ran straight into the distance. Under the control of the magic horned golden fungus beast, the alien flew for a while and came to where Li Ming was. It slowly fell from the air onto the tree trunk, staring at Li Ming motionlessly with dull eyes, while Walker lightly jumped to the ground. At this moment, Li Ming was still resting with his eyes closed. Walker did not disturb him, but just lay quietly beside him. At this time, Li Ming opened his eyes slightly and glanced at the alien in front of him. Then, the green light on his body became stronger, and the green flame enveloped Li Ming's entire body. Then a green hand stretched out from the shadow, grabbed the alien's body, and then pulled hard, and the alien's soul and some things on his body were all pulled out. The green hand slowly pulled back, and in the process of retracting, it had completely absorbed the other party's soul, and as for the things on his body, they also fell into Li Ming's hands. What fell into Li Ming's hand was the space map, which was crucial to Li Ming's future activities in this area, and as for the soul, it was the consciousness information that Li Ming needed. With a light squeeze of his palm, the space map was put away, his eyes slowly closed, and without saying a word, Li Ming began to check the information he had just obtained. First of all, it can be confirmed that this place does belong to the Virgo cluster, but the current location is between the Timmins galaxy and the Timothy galaxy. These 2 large galaxies are satellite galaxies of the Burrows galaxy. Although the Virgo cluster has many large galaxies, it is similar to the local group as a whole, with several large galaxies and their nearby satellite galaxies. The Timmins galaxy is closer to the Burrows galaxy, and is also the closest satellite galaxy to the Burrows galaxy. Timothy is relatively far away, and the alien in front of him belongs to the Timothy galaxy. As for the planet under him, it is called Cabe, which is an energy planet, but the planet is full of oxygen. Ordinary aliens cannot enter directly, and need certain protection. The largest resource on Cabe is Cheyenne Silver, which gathers a lot of energy. After collecting, it is the best energy product, and the galaxy war outside Cabe is also caused by the resources here. The battle between the Timmins Galaxy and the Timothy Galaxy was also for this reason. Chapter 524 Warehouse Base. Li Ming was not interested in the battle and the competition for interests between them, but the information obtained showed that there were two people who landed on Kabu Star for collection. One was an alien from the Timothy Galaxy, the one whose soul Li Ming had just extracted, and the other was from the Timmins Galaxy. Since there were two aliens in total, Moore's disappearance must have been caused by the alien from the Timmins Galaxy. In this way, Li Ming quickly determined the general direction of Moore's whereabouts, but his body had not yet fully recovered. Li Ming could only temporarily recuperate here and make plans after he could fully recover. At this moment, in the Timmins Galaxy, a spaceship entered a star system after a series of transmissions. The spaceship flew slowly in the dark universe, and all the routes were originally set. The target at this time was a gray-black planet. This planet, except for the gray land, was a black mountain range. It looked very desolate and there were no plants. But this was the warehouse base of the Timmins Galaxy. The civilization of the large galaxies in the Virgo Galaxy cluster has developed higher than that of the local group, and most of the galaxies here belong to the Grand Unified Galaxy. The energy distribution and war of the entire galaxy are all unified decisions. The warehouse at this time is also the main warehouse of the galaxy. After a few flashes, the spacecraft has arrived in the space of this planet. The landing transmission into the planet is fuller than the space transmission, but after a few seconds of adjustment, the spacecraft suddenly disappeared with a light hum. When the spacecraft appeared again, it was already above the gray land. At this time, a lot of aliens appeared just below the spacecraft, and there were tall buildings in the distance. Although the spacecraft appeared, there was no transmission ladder for a long time, and only the spacecraft was motionless in the air. The aliens below also looked at each other, not knowing why. In the main cabin of the spacecraft, Boucher was holding more tightly with one hand, looking at the opposite side in horror, and said, What are you going to do?" Opposite Boucher was the Fox Beast, but the Fox Beast at this time was different from before. The whole body was flashing with blue light, and a blue tail dyed the whole body of the Fox Beast blue, and the powerful energy breath continued to radiate around. "It's not space anymore, so you'd better let Mer go, otherwise," the Fox Beast said angrily, and the blue light energy gradually became stronger. This blue light energy was extremely cold. Under the irradiation of the beam, frost had condensed on the walls of the cabin. Seeing this, Boucher frowned, because he had never seen such a powerful wild beast before. After hesitating for a while, he turned his eyes and pulled the Chyanzi flower in Mer's hand. His other hand suddenly stretched out quickly and snatched the Chyanzi flower. Then he lightly tapped the operating table, and the bottom of his feet flashed with blue light, and a portal appeared just below his feet. Boucher's figure then slowly fell down and sank into the blue light little by little, and at the same time, he threw Mer out with his right hand. The Fox Beast's eyes locked onto Mer, and one of its tails swung and extended quickly, and it rolled up Mer and brought him to its side. When it saw Mer returning to its side safely, the Fox Beast immediately smiled. But when Boucher looked at him again, the whole figure had disappeared in the blue light portal. More bit Boucher's position with an angry look on his face, and shouted, "My flower!" The Fox Beast seemed to have received some orders, and clenched its teeth tightly in its mouth, and rushed over quickly. But when the Fox Beast arrived at the blue hole, Boucher had already come to the outside of the spaceship. Outside the spaceship was a blue light circle similar to a searchlight. As soon as Boucher appeared, he shouted, "Quick! Destroy this spaceship!" The aliens below were shocked and didn't understand why, but the person in the camera still waved his arm and shouted, "Attack!" At the command, the soldiers behind him raised their weapons and launched an attack. Lasers were constantly shooting, and the surface of the spaceship was booming. Flames were everywhere, and explosions were heard continuously. The entire spaceship was immediately surrounded by flames and was about to collapse, but at this moment, a blue figure suddenly flew out from the flames. It was the Fox Beast. Moore sat on the back of the Fox Beast, looking at the aliens angrily, and said, "How dare you steal my things?" As soon as he finished speaking, the Fox Beast under him suddenly opened its mouth, and a ball of blue light sprayed out. This blue light was like a phantom, and it went straight to the crowd below. Bang! A muffled sound was heard, and the blue light fell to the ground, just like a ball of something falling from the sky and splashing on the ground. 2 seconds later, the area covered by the blue light had already turned into ice cubes. The aliens and the ground underground were all frozen. Seeing this, Boucher's face changed drastically, and he gritted his teeth tightly and flew away. Want to run? Chase him. Moore waved his wings and shouted loudly. The fox beast turned around and chased after him quickly. Boucher's figure flashed, and he disappeared on the spot, as if he had teleported. When he reappeared, he was already 1,000 meters away. The fox beast also narrowed his eyes and continued to chase after him. The blue figure flew quickly in the air, and the 7 tails were like 7 tentacles. Boucher did not dare to pause at all. His figure flashed again, and he was thousands of meters away again. However, after 2 teleportations, Boucher began to breathe heavily and changed to flying to continue to flee to the distance. He disdained to be a power civilization. In the tribal branches of the power civilization, there is the ability to teleport, but the teleportation here is completely different from the teleportation of the wisdom civilization tribe. The teleportation of the power civilization is a fixed distance. No matter how powerful the energy is, or how high the civilization level is, this cannot be changed. Of course, the only energy that can change is that the star of cultivation is special enough. The teleportation practiced by Li Ming will change according to the growth of the civilization level and the increase of energy in the body, so it is very different. At this time, Boucher was right in front of the base building. These buildings were the same color as the surface, all gray, like buildings piled up with mud, and seemed to be vulnerable. While flying quickly, Boucher operated the metal instrument in his hand, as if sending some information. A moment later, Boucher's figure drilled down and entered the building complex. The fox beast had already locked its eyes on the other party, opened its mouth, and a ball of blue flame spurted out. This ball of blue flame was in the form of a phantom, and it went straight to Boucher. Boucher, who was in the building complex, sensed the energy behind him and quickly dodged sideways. Bang! After a muffled sound, the blue flame broke out in the building complex. In an instant, all the places covered by the blue flame were frozen into ice. Boucher, who saw this scene, changed his face and whispered, "Why haven't the garrison troops come yet?" As soon as he finished speaking, another ball of flame burst out. Boucher was shocked and dodged again. Bang! After a muffled sound, another area was completely frozen. Seeing this, Boucher could only dodge quickly, and the blue flames were one after another. The entire building area was in a mess under this power, and there were signs of freezing everywhere. But this scene only hesitated for a short while, and dozens of aircraft had already surrounded them from all sides. Moore was the first to notice the existence of the aircraft. He turned his eyes around and gently patted the fox beast under him, saying, "Brother, something seems to be wrong." The fox beast then stopped chasing Boucher and looked around, noticing the aircraft. At this time, Boucher in the distance also stabilized his body and stopped. He glanced around, smiled coldly, and said, "Humph, you destroyed my Timmons warehouse base. I must kill you 2 beasts today." The fox beast didn't care at all. He turned his head and said, "Don't worry, brother, I'll take care of everything." As he spoke, one of the 7 tails suddenly flashed with a white tail, and then the whole body of the fox beast turned into white hair. "Brother Moore, hold on to me," the fox beast said with a fierce look in his eyes. After glancing at the aircraft around him, Moore looked at the white fox beast under him and quickly lay down and hugged the fox beast tightly. At this time, the aircraft around him were already in place, with a tendency to surround them. High energy gun barrels were extended one after another, aiming at the fox beast. Before these aircraft could start shooting, the white fox beast made a hissing sound and disappeared on the spot. Chapter 525, Ignored Threat. Again, the fox beast had come to the side of one of the aircrafts and clapped its front paws. Boom. A deafening sound was heard, and the aircraft in front of him exploded directly. Then the surface of the fox beast's body arced again, and it disappeared again. When it reappeared, it was already next to another aircraft. Then there was another loud boom, and that aircraft also exploded and shattered directly. Boucher, who was originally proud, changed his face. The white figure of the fox beast jumped around, and every place it arrived was a boom. Dozens of aircraft had lost more than half before they started to attack. The remaining aircraft dared not stay any longer and turned around and fled. Boucher looked at the scene in front of him, and cold sweat slowly flowed on his forehead. His eyes widened a little, and the muscles on his face twitched slightly. The fear in his heart was self-evident. Seeing the spaceships fleeing everywhere, Moore became excited, and his eyes turned and looked at Boucher in the distance. "Brother, over there," Moore suddenly shouted, and the fox beast's eyes flashed with cold light, and it immediately looked at Boucher. Boucher was stunned by the fox beast's look. A flash of white light appeared, and the fox beast's figure flashed in front of Boucher, with its little paw raised high, just ready to slap the other party. The fox beast was very fast, like lightning, but when it was about to slap, it suddenly stopped, and even Moore's eyes widened. At this time, Boucher bent down and bowed deeply, raised his hands in front of him, and offered the heavenly flower high. "You two, don't be angry, I'm willing to offer the heavenly flower," Boucher said tremblingly. Boucher's sudden change made Moore stunned. He looked at the fox beast under him, then looked at Boucher, and touched his chin with one wing. Boucher was extremely nervous at the moment. He was even more worried when he sensed that Moore had not taken the Cheyenne flower away. After hesitating for a while, he said, "This is Timmons warehouse base. There are still many high energy materials. You two can choose whatever you want." Moore smiled with satisfaction and took the Cheyenne flower back in his hand. He said, "Then take us to have a look." Hearing this, Boucher was relieved. This just showed that his life was temporarily safe. Then he said, "Okay, follow me." While speaking, Boucher turned around and flew to the construction area below. The fox beast was hesitant at the moment. He looked up at Moore and said, "Brother Moore, aren't we going back to find the master?" Moore patted the fox beast's head and said, "Silly brother, of course we have to go back, but we have to have enough fun first." The fox beast was still hesitant when he heard this. Moore said confidently, "Let's go. Listen to me, that's right." The fox beast looked helpless. Although he wanted to return to Li Ming, he was worried about Moore, so he had no choice but to fly to the construction area below. At this moment, on the headquarters planet in the Timmons galaxy, 4 aliens were discussing something. "In this war, we, on civilization, paid the most. The Cheyenne should be decomposed by us." The alien with a flat head like a scale said somewhat unhappily. House, who was sitting opposite him, shook his head slightly and said, "Buck, 2/3 of the spacecraft are supplied by us, Rosso civilization. Shouldn't we be the ones to decompose the Cheyenne?" Buck gritted his teeth and showed a fierce look. Just when he was about to say something else, the general in the middle suddenly waved his hand and said, "You don't have to fight for the decomposition and distribution of Cheyenne. The war data has come out. Whoever has invested the most will naturally decompose it. Right, Allison?" At the end, the general looked at the person opposite him. Allison didn't seem to want to fight for it. His expression was calm. He replied, "I will follow the general's arrangement." The general nodded with satisfaction and raised his hand to point at the air. Suddenly, a blue light flashed on the table surrounded by the 4 people. The blue light wove out a series of data. Looking at the data, the general said, "The war is over. As far as I know, no Cheyenne was found in the Timothy galaxy. We are still relatively lucky." According to the data, the Cheyenne can only be decomposed by Buck. House snorted coldly, but didn't say much. Buck smiled proudly. The general also continued, "I believe you have no objection to this data. Then contact Boucher and ask him to send the Cheyenne to Buck's on civilization base." While talking here, on the warehouse base planet of the Timmons galaxy, Moore was happily flying around in a small new spaceship and having a lot of fun on the building complex. The fox beast also accompanied Moore. The two of them laughed wildly from time to time, as if they were taking a ride. On the roof of a building, Boucher had a helpless look on his face and could only watch the 2 big brothers playing wantonly. At this moment, a device on Boucher's arm suddenly beeped, and a message came. Looking at the information on the device, Boucher frowned tightly and then looked up at the sky, gnashing his teeth and whispering, "They actually asked me to take Cheyenne to the Onan system. What a joke, these 2 guys." As he said this, he was even more worried, thinking, "But if I don't send it over, it may be more troublesome." In a dilemma, more in the sky suddenly flew down and came directly to Boucher's side. He saw the hatch open, and more flew into the sky, shaking his head unhappily, and said, "This is not fun. This is not fun. Is there anything else?" Boucher was already worried about how to solve the problem at hand. Hearing Moore's question, he paused and stammered, unable to speak. Moore became even more angry when he saw this. His eyes widened a little, and he said viciously, "Hurry up. Hurry up and show the fun first, otherwise." As he spoke, the fox beast under Moore suddenly bared its teeth and looked like it was about to go crazy. Boucher waved his hand and replied, "Wait, let me think." His eyes moved, and he thought quickly. After a few seconds, Boucher suddenly tensed up and seemed to have suddenly thought of something. He said, "There really aren't many fun things here, but I know a place with a lot of fun. I can take you there. What do you think?" Boucher asked tremblingly. He naturally had a detailed plan in his mind, but he was afraid that Moore would refuse, so he could only speak carefully. "Really?" Moore's eyes were wide open with golden light, as if he had seen some treasure, and he opened his eyes wide. Boucher was also somewhat surprised. He forced a smile and said, "Of course, it's true." Mew immediately waved his arm happily and said, "Then take us there quickly." Boucher smiled slightly and said, "Please follow me." As he spoke, Boucher turned and walked away. As he walked, he breathed a sigh of relief and thought to himself, "The Cheyenne sea flower is on it. If I take it directly to the Onan civilization, my mission will be accomplished." Thinking of this, Boucher's worries also subsided a lot. A moment later, a spaceship took off from near the construction area and then disappeared in a flash. In the main cabin of the spaceship was Boucher. Moore stayed in the auxiliary cabin with a proud look on his face, saying, "What do you think will be more fun?" The fox beast was absent-minded. After looking at Moore, he said, "Brother Moore, are we really not going back to the master?" Moore was originally excited, but when he heard this, he waved his hand disdainfully and said, "Brother, why are you so disappointed? Since we are out, we have to have enough fun before going back." The fox beast was originally worried about Moore's safety, but now he can only follow Moore passively. After a while of teleportation, Boucher drove the spacecraft to a new galaxy, which was the galaxy where the Onan civilization was located, the Onan galaxy. A star in the galaxy, Bishop, is the location of the Onan civilization. After determining the target, the spacecraft quickly approached this star. While operating the spacecraft to fly, Boucher sent information about Moore and the fox beast through the console, and the fox beast must be powerful. This information needs to be informed to the Onan civilization as soon as possible. Although Boucher sent a lot of information, the reply he received in the end was not taken seriously. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.